Yeah, but Federici's Pizza's there.
I found a better place the other day than Federici's.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's called Pop Pop, some random fucking place. I don't know. It was crazy though.
Phil, do you know Pete? Bruno's Pizza, that place in Wayne?
We've met before. I don't know him.
Oh, he just mailed me pizza last week because I haven't had pizza. I haven't had pizza in like 3 years, and I was like, I need a real fucking pizza.
Did he send you one of those dessert pizzas?
No, I hate those fucking things. I just wanted like real fucking pizza.
People make such a big deal over those. I had it. I was so disappointed.
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea. I mean, I get why it looks good and feels good and tastes good, but I just wanted like a plain fucking pizza. Like literally, I haven't had one in so long. I was like, oh.
So what did you freeze it and send it overnight to you?
Yeah, dry ice.
How did it come out?
It was fucking delicious. 10 minutes in the oven, and it fucking was amazing. It was the best thing.
Dude, I swear to God, down here in Florida, it's the first time in my whole life, like, pizza's like sex. Like, it's not, like, there's no bad pizza. It's just not as good as, like, some people. I swear to God, I threw out a pizza here. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
there's definitely shit pizza. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
but I've
crazy.
never had pizza so bad that I threw it out.
That's because you can't eat. You got an appetite.
Oh, God. All right, I don't know how you guys want to start. It's up to you.
I mean, we'll just roll right into it, I guess. All right. So welcome back to another episode of Tack Bodybuilding. I'm joined again with Phil and Kyle, and today we have Nick Trigili. It's nice to have you on, man. Nice meeting you for the first time. I appreciate you guys
having me on.
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. I remember the first time I think I saw you. I was probably, I don't know, 12, 13. I don't really have a story. I just remember watching you in that. It was like a Muscle Med documentary or something about you and your journey at some point. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So that was a while ago.
Mike Puccinella, I think, did that. He was, when they brought me on, I was like super, super young. I think I was like 21 or 20 or something. And the owner, Gerard, was like an old school Italian guy. And I actually... The only reason I got sponsors is because this guy named Phil, know him, Rodney Roller. Remember Rodney Roller? He like found me in a gym that I was training at, actually in Monmouth County. Kyle, you go there, Jersey Shore Fitness Shop.
Okay.
And he was like, hey, he's like, you should talk to the owner of Muscle Meds. You should be sponsored. I'm like, all right. Meanwhile, I haven't done a show now since I was like a teen. And and then he literally drove me to fucking Muscle Meds headquarters, and then they signed me. I got a magazine contract like 2 weeks later from Muscular Development. And that's like where for me, that was like my PR campaign at that time. That was all I had. And then from there, like Muscle Meds had me for years. I was only with them throughout my whole career. And, but that's really where it started, was that little documentary that they did. And that was like social media back then, was that stuff, you know, like a YouTube video here and there that you got, or like promotional stuff on a website or magazine. But yeah, that was good. Wow, you were 12? Fuck. Make me feel old now.
Something like that. I mean, I'm 25 now. You said you're 37.
I actually remember when Nick first came back to bodybuilding, because he competed when he was young, and then he kind of disappeared. I know he went back to selling cars. He took a little break, and then all of a sudden he popped up, and he had put on like 100 pounds of muscle in like a few years. And everybody was like, yo, what the fuck did he do? And his arms were just like gigantic. And I lived in the area, but I hadn't seen Nick in a while because he had stopped bodybuilding, stopped coming to the gym. And everybody's telling me when I see them, they're like, yo, did you see Nick? They're like, he's enormous. And everybody was talking about, because Evan Centopani was like a big deal right back then. Yeah. And everybody was like telling me, they're like, yo, Nick is going to beat him. They're like, wait until he really gets up there. They're like, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, he got that big. And then I saw him, I was like, oh shit. Yeah, I guess he did.
So you guys are all from the same area, right? You guys are
we're from the same
boys.
Gym.
Yes. Yeah.
The gym I go to, same gym.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nick was working the front desk when I was competing.
I can tell you a funny story, Sebastian. I was working there as a kid, as a teenager, and I got kicked out of high school, right? So I was kicked out of kicked out of St. Rose, which is in Belmar, which is like the next town over. And I had to get a job for my probation. So I got a job at the gym. I was like 15, 16. That's how I met Phil. And I was working the overnights, like 11 to 7 in the morning, because it's 24 hours. But then I was like, long story short, fast forward, I was stealing the punch cards that they used to sell for like, they used to sell them for like $50 or something. It was like 10 visits. It didn't expire. So I was putting like a whole box in my gym bag like every day, and I was selling them to like the gym members like on the side.
I wish I knew that.
Yeah, I was selling them for like $25, and I was like selling boxes of them like left and right. But then someone told on me like a couple months later, so they fired me. But I was like, listen, I need to pretend like I still work here because I'm on probation for like all this shit I got in trouble for in high school. So they let me pretend like I was working there, and they gave me my gym membership still for free. And that's like literally how I met everybody at the time. I met Gaspari there, Victor Martinez, Jason Arntz, fucking Marty, that lunatic. Who else was in there?
Marty.
Remember Marty?
Is that the big fucking
he's
guy?
Still there. He's still there.
That's the huge
still
motherfucker.
There?
He's still
huge,
there.
man, bald with his like.
He's like 6'5".
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to have a big ponytail, and he was, bro, back then he was enormous. Like when I tell you enormous, like larger than any person you've probably ever seen because he was so tall. But he was also super jacked. Like Phil will tell you, he was humongous. His straps were like up to his fucking ear. It was insane.
When you saw him, it was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like it was actually like you're like, wow, like I didn't know humans can even get that big. Like he was that big. And then he never did anything, but he was a drug addict, unfortunately. But yeah, he just washed
people every day there.
I can't believe he's still there. That's wild shit, man. Was he
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think he would still be alive.
Yeah, well, that too. He was a really bad drug addict. Like not even like bad, like all types of shit. But he's like a really nice, small-spoken guy, so I was nice to him. Well, that's funny. I can't believe Marty's still there. But yeah, that was like for me, that was like where I discovered drugs. That's where I discovered recreational drugs. Where I discovered Phil. And and Phil was the one that talked me into doing my first show. Then, like that was when I was like I was still running track at the time. I
remember we said you won a local show very easily, and then you went to Teen Nationals, and that's where you met John O'Regan.
Yeah, that's where I met O'Regan.
So then, Phil, when did you work there?
I didn't work there. I worked out there.
He'll come in the middle of the night, like a fucking night crawler, and work out.
I was bodybuilding at the time, and I started getting big, and Nick worked the front desk, and I remember just Nick like disappeared for a little bit, like I hadn't seen him, and all of a sudden they're like, "Have you seen Nick?" They're like, "He blew up." I'm like,
that's why I got fired. Yeah, I got fired.
I'm like, which Nick? I'm like, pretty boy Nick? Because Nick had like the hair, he was all pretty boy, got all the girls. So like Nick used to get into the clubs at like 17 years old and get all the girls. I wonder if they even knew how old he was, but like they're like, yeah, he did a cycle and he put on 45 pounds. I'm like, no way. And I saw him, I was like, holy shit. I'm like, oh, you're gonna be good at this.
Yeah, that was those are the good years. That was good. That
what's actually funny? Brings back a memory. Nick is one of the only people that I've ever trained with my whole life that went toe to toe with me for legs. We were training one day.
Yeah, huh? My fucking chopped liver.
Yeah, no. Listen, I'm being honest. Like
violating Kyle.
We had to look at each other. We had to look at each other and be like, all right, that's enough. Because neither one of us was going to stop, and we were both going 100%. We were upstairs in the free motion room, just supersetting lunges and squats for we were going for like 4 fucking hours trying to kill each other, and neither one would quit, and neither one would drop.
We weren't really friends yet, Kyle. We were like kind of like we liked each other, but we weren't sure if we liked each other.
Each other.
Yeah, we're like trying to feel each other out still. So it was like more of like a bigger dick contest, like who can last and who's going to die. So like it wasn't an effective workout. I'll tell you that much. No. It was way overtraining.
We must have done 100 sets. It was ridiculous.
Where were you in all of this, Kyle? You were still.
Kyle wasn't around yet. We were young. We were real young. And the thing is, the whole gym was watching. So like it put even more pressure. Neither one of us wanted to quit. So like finally we just looked at each other. We're like, this is just never going to end. We're done. We're like, all right, yeah, we're done. It was ridiculous.
That was funny.
So how did you meet Kyle?
How did I meet Kyle?
Not you, no.
Nick. I met Kyle through Phil, actually. I think I was this was later on though. This was like when we moved up north and
when I moved down the street from you in North Jersey.
Yeah. When I was living in Fort Lee. And I think Kyle, I think you were over Phil's house one day, if I'm not mistaken, right?
After I beat his ass in legs, I was at his house.
So this is like figure 2012, maybe 13,
15, maybe I think
somewhere around there, right? I don't know if I was pro yet or
I
not.
think it was 2017.
Bro, you had
Oh.
taken a break, and then I remember
It was like 14, 15 then, somewhere around there.
yeah, because the first time I ever met you indirectly was your show at the Europa. I came up to Phil the first time I was meeting Phil. He was a total asshole to me. And he brought me over to your booth. I forgot where you were.
Oh,
He was feeding you before prejudging.
I do remember this. Yeah.
And that's when I met you. And then
Yeah.
you had done that show, and then I think you kind of just stopped bodybuilding for a little bit. And then you kind of came back. You're again much bigger, off-season shape.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, okay, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, wow, it's a lot of time that went by already. That's fucking crazy. Wow.
So Phil keeps mentioning this thing about how you disappeared for some time. You came back huge. Tell me what happened in that time frame. How did that transformation happen? What were you doing that caused this massive difference?
Yeah, so when I did my teen shows, I honestly was not sure, and this could probably help a lot of people, that I wasn't sure if I liked bodybuilding yet. I was kind of like in between 50-50, like, hey, I'll see how this works out, but not convinced yet, like, hey, this is what I want to do with my life, right? And I loved bodybuilding, but I wasn't sure if I was into like the whole competing aspect of it, right? The whole competing part's a little different, obviously. So I was just literally just lifting, eating, taking lots of steroids, obviously, not the right way. And this is like figured the time frame from like 16 to like, I don't know, 21 by the time probably Phil saw me. So I was still very, very young, very inexperienced, didn't really have any like tried and true methods yet on like what works. I was just literally like eating as much as I could, training as hard as I could, and obviously cycling nonstop. And to be honest, I would never ever preach that formula to anyone to do, because it was reckless and careless, right? And at that period of time, remember, there's not, for people that are watching or younger, there was no places to go to get information. There was only forums or like your friends in the gym that could educate you on what to do and not to do. And no one had like the training split to do or the cycle to do, or we knew what to eat relatively like clean and what to have, but there was no science supporting anything that we were doing. So when I got to like 21, 22, I realized like, okay, I guest posed actually at a Gold's Gym show. It wasn't competing, but one of the owners, I was working at one of the Gold's Gym personal training. He wanted me to guest pose. So I got on stage and guest pose. Phil probably remembers this. And I haven't competed yet. I haven't done a show since I was a teen. And I got a really crazy response from that. I was like 20 or 21. And then the whole thing happened with muscle meds and muscular development. Now I'm sponsored. I'm like, oh, I fucking guess I got to compete now. So at that point, I was still using like the obvious things like growth hormone and testosterone and a lot of insulin, more than likely at that time. And of course, your anabolics, like your typical stuff, your Deca and Equipoise. But the thing is, like I said, I would never tell anyone to do this. I was not coming off. I was not doing any type of health check or blood work, because blood work was extremely hard to get even at that time. So the only way I could monitor my health was just how I felt. And as you guys know, you went through your teens and early 20s already. Like, you feel invincible no matter what the fuck you do. So it's not really a good correlation to say, oh, this is what you should do, because there's no side effects when you're that young for the most part, as long as you're not like extremely unhealthy with things. So at that time, I don't think I had like a method to my madness. It was more of me like trial and error. And then I had John O'Regan, which, if people that don't know who he is, they called him like the mad scientist as a coach. And if you look him up, he coached a lot of the upcoming guys in the Northeast, and he's known for like pushing heavy cycles, right? So a lot of my knowledge, unfortunately, came from John early on. And I'm not saying it was wrong, but he's like a 50-year-old man at the time giving me drug knowledge to like an 18, 19, 20-year-old. And these cycles were like nothing light. They were not like your easygoing, like, oh yeah, let me just run some TRT dose and some like, these were heavy duty cycles, right?
Do you remember the milligrams or the exact cycles?
Everything started with 1 and ended in a 0, and there was more than 3 digits. No, but seriously, I mean, testosterone was never under 1,000 milligrams. I mean, no matter what I was doing back then. Like for me, like a cruise would be. Is that you? Okay. For me, a cruise would be like when I was younger is 500, 600, 700 milligrams testosterone only, right? And then you throw your anabolics in and your orals and everything else, it adds up like really quick. So the thing that I really didn't run high ever, and this people may not agree or disagree to this, but like tren, I could never handle a lot. Like if I went over, and this is not like a light dose, but if I went over more than like 500, 600, 700 milligrams a week, I'm a disaster. Like I just couldn't even handle it, right? Mentally. Same with like the orals. I didn't run a lot of orals. My appetite was very, very sensitive to orals. So I would use them, but like not like crazy high doses. Like we had several friends and bodybuilder acquaintances that would run, no problem, run 200 milligrams of Anadrol. Like wouldn't even bat an eye at it, right? And to me that was, and it wasn't effective for me because I'm like, wait, I can't eat. What's the point of doing this? And I'm just like, this is not smart. So those are the things I picked up at a very young age. And it's not like crazy. It's not like, some crazy secret, but I was just paying attention to what was working and what wasn't working. I just tried to steer myself like that until I got more knowledgeable and met the right people and realized like, oh shit, okay, I don't need to do this. I don't need to do that. Right. But things were very heavy early on, like that age, that time frame. And then as I got older, number one, I got better quality gear, which was like massively like a life changer. Right. And back then you could still get some decent pharmaceutical stuff. Like you can get some good amps, you can get some real pharmaceutical drugs, not just labeled pharmaceutical. And the quality was 100 times better, which I could use way less. And I'm not just saying that. I truly mean the quality was night and day difference. And Phil can attest that time frame. Like you can still get really good quality stuff, but it was so expensive, right? Like one amp of Preobone was like $20, and it's 100 milligrams, So I couldn't even afford to do 500 milligrams of Preobone if I wanted to. So I would be like, okay, well, I'm only going to take 100 this week, or 200, right? But my body was changing 2-3 times faster, using less, using higher quality stuff. So that's when I started to like realize like, whoa, okay, something's off here,
It's actually
same with
growth. It's actually a really funny story. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to throw this in there with you because you mentioned that about the pricing. I remember Rich Gaspari telling me that one of the reasons why all of the pros did the Grand Prix was because they went to those countries and they sold the gear really cheap. And he said everybody would bring like an empty suitcase and send the fucking suitcase home full for the year with like loads of gear that they got for a decent price.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the quality was, like growth hormone, right? You guys deal with this probably. Generic growth hormone, I don't know if you guys like it or not, but night and day difference when I went from a generic growth hormone to a farm. Like it just, the amount of tissue I would build, my recovery was faster. My strength was like, didn't make sense. Like it was silly strong, as you guys know that feeling, right? So that's when I started to realize like, well, I guess the dose matters to a certain degree, but I'm not going to put too much emphasis on that because I'm taking the same drug now, but I at least know the quality of it and authenticity of it. And I'm doing a third of what I used to do. So, I don't put a lot of emphasis on the doses. The quality always has to come first, but nowadays it's very different. So obviously I know people don't have the time or don't have the resources to do that. But yeah, I was heavy hitting at a very young age, but luckily I didn't have that many side effects per se. I didn't have any like pushbacks where I was like, oh, let me stop doing this. So I just kept going, unfortunately. I wish there was like a red flag somewhere along the way, but wasn't doing blood work when I was younger. Like I was very stupid,
How long were you running a cycle continuously, if you give like an approximate time frame, before you ever took a break or went down to TRT?
Well, so that time frame, I didn't come off. Like there was
like 5 years straight.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Never came off once.
Nick got stupid strong in that time period.
And had no negative side effects. Health is completely fine.
I'll be honest with you. To this day, I've never been off testosterone since I started. I never went off, ever.
No, I mean, just like, say you drop fucking Deca, whatever, come just down to TRT. You never did that.
Well, yeah, no, back then, like during that small time frame we're talking about, I would just go from one drug to another. Like my testosterone would just stay at like 1,500, 2,000 a week. And then I would just be like, oh, Deca, I ran for 10 weeks. Let's put EQ in. And then I would just go to like MPP. It would just be like a rotating door of anabolics and androgens all the time, you know.
Nick actually doesn't know this, that I got really pissed off one time because when we were younger, we were relatively the same strength, and we were always competitive with each other. And I remember one time coming in, and he was flat benching, and I see him like toying with 405 for like 10, 12 reps. I'm like, how the fuck did that even happen? And then he did like 2 or 3 sets like that, and I'm just like, I mean, I guess thankfully he decided to stop pushing his strength up. God knows how strong you would have gotten.
Yeah, I didn't like lifting heavyweight. It scared the shit out of me. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't like lifting heavy. After I hurt my back deadlifting when I was like super young, like that's why I have 480 discs. I never, ever did a deadlift again. And then I never, ever tried to lift heavy again. Like I literally gave it up from that point. And I was like 21 when I did that. So and that was when I was lifting with a bunch of like idiots that were just literally straight power lifters pretty much, you know, but gear wise then, yeah, like I said, I don't straight up warning, do not do that. Right. Cause like, thank the God up there watching me, I didn't have any problems from doing that, which again, I have no reason why something should have happened. Right. Like, and also we're all big on health supplements now. We all understand the importance of them. I wasn't running any. I didn't take a fucking liver kit. I didn't even know what that was back then when I was 16, 17, 8. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no one talked about any of that stuff back then. It was just like, oh, come off and you'll get healthy somehow. Like, it's just magically going to happen. So when I did come off the one time, like at that point when I took a break, when I actually started working with people I knew what the fuck they were talking about, I really didn't lose any muscle tissue. I didn't have any issues. I always had a good appetite as long as I didn't use any orals. As long as I kept eating and training, like I didn't shrivel up to anything, right? I never really lost too much tissue coming off. And then at that point, like by the time I was like 21, 22, and I started to do things the right way, I would do like you're asking a question about how long the cycles were. So like off seasons, I would push until I didn't feel well as far as like strength, joints, appetite. Like I would start using those metrics as like, okay, I should probably pull back. So it would vary from like 12 to like 20 weeks, like a push. And then I would take a little bit of a break.
What is the break?
How long was the break?
What is define a break? What do you consider
I would
break?
at that point I would go down to like a 500 milligrams a week of testosterone. That was like my break, right? And growth hormone would still stay in. I never came off growth hormone no matter what. I would titrate the doses up and down. Like I would do push cycles with it and pull back, but I never came off growth or testosterone like that till I was like 30. And that's when I started taking a break. And then by like, you know, when I turned pro at 25, you know, like I would say my early 20s to like at that point on, I started doing blood work and I was like, okay, I got to do these things. And again, it was still like very like weird to go do all these things. It was hard. Like no one, and you spent so much money getting blood work. It was so expensive. It was insane. And as a juice head, you're like, I'm not partying with $500. Like I'm buying a cycle. I'm not buying blood work. So it was the most meathead approach you could possibly take. I'm not bragging about my approach. It was a horrible idea, but if I can look back and do it all over, I would absolutely, you know.
So where did you get this idea from that was normal to do? Because this is what you're 37. We're talking 17 years ago, something like that, early 2010s, late 2000s. You also hear guys back in the 90s and 80s, they would always say, oh, we would, in a lot of cases, we don't even run gear in the off season. We only do it during prep. So like, is that just bullshit? Where did you get the idea that you just run it indefinitely? Why is there two completely different approaches being stated here, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Number one, I think I'm not going to say the race, but I think some guys have the genetic advantage, right? And I did have friends like that. I'm sure we all did that. They would get away with murder. Like they would literally grow taking like a couple 100 milligrams of stuff and their body would just like blow up, right? You know, I've trained with some of those guys and they're just not human. Like it's almost not even the same. We're not even the same race, humanity, right? Like they're not even human when they work out. Their glycogen levels are just like through the roof. They look full all the time. Like there's a lot of those guys at the top of the sport. And once I started meeting them, I realized that there's a very small percentage of them doing that. Like, and it's like 1%, right? And somehow their narrative gets out there that everyone's doing that. Like no one's taking a lot of drugs and everyone's coming off and doing these perfect PCTs. But then really when you meet the guys that are like, you know, doing the manual labor with everything, like have to take every drug under the world, have to maximize everything, have to train like lunatics, have to eat 10 meals a day. They're the ones that are never coming off, right? They're doing high doses all the time. Yeah, they get blood work done. Yeah, they're on top of their health, but like they're pushing the envelope really hard. And for some reason, that narrative never gets out there. I don't know if it's because like, people's egos are fragile in this sport and people want to pretend like the drugs aren't a big part of it, or their hard work. They want to see their hard work, supersede all that. And I don't know what it is, to be honest with you, but I will tell you this, being in the one of the guys that had to do things excessively to get where I wasn't like, I was a genetic freak as a responder to drugs, but I wasn't this masculine, muscular dude before I got in the gym. I was a skinny little rail, and Phil will tell you that. Yeah, I had like roundness to my muscle and stuff. I was an athlete, but I wasn't a bodybuilder by any means. So
yeah, big calves.
Yeah, calves. Yeah. So like I drugged myself to that point, and I'll put it all. I'm not saying my effort was the best. I didn't train hard, Seb. I'll be the first one to tell you.
He was just telling me you guys went leg to leg for 5 hours.
Like, my training was not what like you see like a Nick Walker do, like, or Ian or C-Bum. Like I was not calculated and meticulous about anything I did back then. What I
will say is Nick has a natural knack and inclination, just a natural ability to connect to muscles. He knows how to use the muscle. He knows how to fire off the muscle. He knows how to contract the muscle. If you watch Nick train, you can literally see like he's really targeting whatever. Like I actually ended up fixing my back and making my back grow because I watched him do a dumbbell row when we trained together at Signature, and I realized what he was doing that I was doing wrong. So Nick had a really good ability to connect to muscles. He really just kind of got it and really understood. He did train hard. What he's saying is he doesn't do stupid things, but he trained, and Nick didn't miss meals. I remember seeing him at Muscle Meds boots, food in his mouth, sitting down watching the show, food in his mouth.
Yeah, no, I liked eating. That wasn't a problem. But no, the train, no, I just mean as in, I didn't have like a logbook, I didn't track my lifts. I didn't care about progressing on weight. I would do a new exercise every week for my back. I would never go in there and do the same exercise week after week. Like I winged the training, right? I would go in the gym, be like, what am I feeling today? What do I got to work on? Right. And I have my photos and I'd be like, what?
I was just saying, I feel like that's how the majority of people train until I feel like it's a kind of a new thing where everybody is so calculated. When I go training, it's just, what do I feel like doing today? And just feel the workout out.
Yeah. So absolutely. I think just the last couple of years or so, right, things have like really ramped up with the training where it's like, you got to do this, you got to do that. Right. And like, I think John Jewett or someone, or Mike Israel, one of these guru guys talk about how they do like chest with their fucking quads and like fucking traps with their forearms. Right. I was doing that like back then, but instinctively not realizing it's like a thing or anything. I was just fucking doing it because I was like, I don't feel like doing fucking quads today. I'm going to do hamstrings, and I'm going to do some traps because my traps look flat, like that's literally how my brain was wired when I was like an early 20-year-old, So, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I didn't have like a method to my madness at all. It was just like I was doing instinctively what I felt like doing. And that's why I really didn't like, other than John. Yeah, I had Fakri help me for a little while, and obviously Phil helped me for a little while at the end there when I was like going for my first pro show. I didn't want to fucking deal with any of it, but I tried to learn as much as I could. And I preach that to everybody now. Don't just sit there, and I know we're all coaches and all, but like I like the athletes or the clients that are actually receptive to what you tell them versus like, oh, they ask questions, they don't even do it, they don't follow it, they don't care, or the ones that do it and they say this doesn't work. People don't give things a chance, and they think it's supposed to work like immediately when you give them something to do, or they think it's supposed to work because their friend does it, or you're coaching one of their friends and you told them to do it. It's not working. And it's like, this shit's like a process. I've done so many things the first time for years, didn't work. And then I tried again years later and I'm like, I love it. It's working now. So the progression has to be there, and you have to be aware of everything you're doing, like the diet, the foods, the hormones. You can't just sit there and be a robot with this stuff. It's never going to end up well that way either.
People used to be a lot more in touch with what worked for them because we didn't have anybody online telling us what to do, saying this works, this doesn't. That's never going to grow your biceps. Well, fucking tell this guy over here with 23-inch arms it doesn't work for his biceps. So we really would pay attention to what worked for us and figure it out. Whereas a lot of these kids today, they'll be doing something and they might be doing it right, but then they'll read online that it's wrong, and so they'll stop doing it.
It's very true. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. You get in this like tunnel vision of like the things you remember, all the things you see online. You're like, oh, that's wrong. So you don't even try to even experiment with things, right? Like moving your grip, moving your elbows, this, that, like just little things that can really change things for you. And like you guys all know, we're all different shapes and sizes. So like things could work differently for all of us. So, but yeah, I wish I was born in this educational experience, video, effort, help everywhere. Like people have it so good nowadays with information.
Do you think so? Because I kind of feel like it's the opposite way. I feel like there is an abundant amount of information, which is good. But I think the majority of people that are intaking this information, for one, they don't have the experience to be able to like differentiate what is bullshit and what's not. So they get caught up in a lot of stuff. They don't have the awareness to recognize, whether or not they're becoming dogmatic and sticking into a camp. And they all get this analysis paralysis. They're afraid of going to failure. They're afraid of fatigue. Everything is such an overthought process in their head. And we don't see competitors getting better. We don't see all these, genetic freaks coming out of the woodworks. From what it looks like to me, even though there was less education out there 20 years ago, that somehow produced better athletes.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think if you have the right individual that's open-minded to things and sticks to his guns and is willing to like trial and error things, I think they would make you see the ones that really, flourish, like a Nick or something, right? Or Hunter, where he's come from, right? Just like naming some bodybuilders, right? And they were able to make advancements, even though they were pretty much like at their peak, they're still making progress because they're just very open-minded to trial and error. They don't get distracted by the noise. Like they stay focused, which is very hard to do, right? And obviously hiring the right person to guide you is really hard to find because it's like a needle in a haystack. Like there's so many people coaching and there's gurus and there's teams. And it's like, do you want to fit in? Do you want to have a coach that knows what he's doing? Do you want to get sponsored? It's like so many different options with coaches. So I think you're dead on though. It could be definitely overwhelming to someone that's not ability to stick to something and just like block out the noise.
I think that it gets confusing nowadays because because everybody can just say whatever they want, right? So there's so much conflicting information that nobody knows who exactly to listen to. And Nick's page on Instagram, I think, is actually phenomenal because Nick is constantly picking people out that are giving wrong information and correcting it. But the thing is, now he'll catch flack from the people complaining about that. Oh, you're picking on this guy. No, he's helping you out because he's giving the right information. I think a lot of the people that are pissed off about him picking on people, they're afraid they're next. They're afraid they're going to say something wrong, and he's going to come across their page and see it, and then he's going to post it because we don't have anybody policing this.
I think the biggest thing that I would wish that could be different, not maybe not so much like the training information, the diet information, right? But definitely the health part, right? Like the fact that you could take care of yourself and do this now is like, I mean, night and day. I wish we had the ability to have hormone clinics and blood work whenever you fucking want and all these other tests that you can do now, right? Like digestion issues, like, man, like how many times I hit a brick wall back then and like you couldn't even get blood work, you couldn't get a GI map test, you couldn't do any of these things, right? Food intolerances. No one even talked about any of that stuff back then. So there was like zero. When I tell you zero, like I mean zero information. It was just a bunch of bros talking on forums, trying things, experimenting, and then giving their 2 cents on what worked. And that's literally that was the encyclopedia of information, and it was just regurgitated shit.
I like that because we all had our knowledge pooled in one centralized place on the forums, right? So if somebody said something wrong, somebody else was going to correct them, right? It wasn't spread out. So it was everybody pooled into one place. Now everything is so spread out that you don't know who the heck to listen to. You don't know what's right and wrong. If somebody presents something right and they speak good and they have a good production and they cut it and they have captions and they have clever marketing, people think they know what they're talking about and they get 1 million followers and then everybody's listening to them. And there's very few people that, like Nick is now correcting a lot of people and he's doing a very good job with it. I think everybody watching this should follow him because be mad as you want. He's right. You can be mad as you want. Tell me how he's wrong, So the fact of the matter is we need more people that, are correcting these people. So people stop talking about things that they're not sure of, that they don't know. They'll read something online and then they go run to go post about it. Like you have no idea what you're talking about.
See, but there's a fundamental flaw with what you're saying, and it's the fact that those people think they know what they're talking about, and their intention is usually to help people. So it's not like there's malicious intent there. These people are just not as educated as they seem to believe, which is like, what can you do about that if somebody's trying to help? I think the individual person just needs to become there. I don't know why people fall into these camps where they follow somebody and they think that now this guy is everything he says is what I'm going to follow, rather than just maintaining an open mind and thinking, okay, why is this guy saying that? And then why is this guy saying that? And then doing due diligence to try to explore where the bullshit is. It's like people just want to hear one thing from one person, and then anything outside of that is bullshit. And that doesn't work in any scenario, no matter what it is.
Yeah, I think responsibility falls on like the educator and also the person watching it that has to be like, okay, I have to do my own research too on if this guy is full of shit, So
yeah, but we see the crazy things going on today. Nick, what are some of the craziest things that you've seen? Like, 'cause I know you've seen a lot of things. People send you a lot of things. What are some of the craziest things going on right now that you think are ridiculous?
Are we talking?
It could be an influencer. It could be something that people are. Listen, Nick has gone after Sulek a bunch of times. Listen, the kid's huge. The kid's jacked, but he does a lot of shit wrong. And
that's a perfect example of like myself at 20 years old, 19, 18, 21, right? And I didn't even eat as bad as Sam, right? I'm not saying I even did what Sam eats, like a fucking idiot. It's straight up, like total idiot, like a child. And I almost at this point, I don't want to shit on him because he's probably a really nice kid. I never met him. But like at some point, like you see a full grown alpha fucking male juiced up and you see him eating cereal for breakfast. Like, and he thinks cereal. And listen, I knew cereal back then was garbage, but I still ate it because I just wanted to fucking have a bowl of cereal. But he literally thinks the macros in cereal make sense for him to eat every single day for his carbs and his like. He literally thinks it's like the secret to getting jacked is cereal. And listen, I ate cereal, Phil ate Rice Krispie treat bars, and I ate fucking Pop-Tarts when I wanted them. But like, I wasn't like, oh, my macros are hit today with my fucking 28 Pop-Tarts. Like, I just find it unbelievable that he actually thinks this is like credible nutrition for himself to put on muscle. Like, this kid would be so unbelievably jacked if someone guided him properly. Like, I can't even imagine what that kid would look like if he had proper guidance. Like, he looks like that. He's a freak already, right? So that's what bothers me the most about him is that he legitimately is believing the shit that he spews out of his mouth. I was watching a video the other day with him with the cereal and the 3 gallons of milk a day and chocolate.
3 gallons of milk?
Chocolate milk, half a block of cream cheese for his fats. And I'm just sitting there like, there's no way he believes this. But at this point, he's been doing it for so long and he legitimately thinks this is like proper nutrition. And, and that kid's got like a cult following,
I've skimmed through maybe 1 or 2 of his videos. I have never sat down and watched a full video, so I don't know how true what you're saying is. I know that you previously made a video and there was like a rebuttal as he doesn't always eat like that. It was just one video, right?
Oh,
so
every day.
Saying he always eats like this?
Every day.
I don't know.
He says it. He literally says it in the video. Like I was watching one the other day. I did a reaction to it. I didn't put it out yet. His breakfast was like 3 bowls of cereal, almost a box of cereal. And then he had literally a gallon of milk for breakfast, right? Some Fairlife milk. He had a half a block of cream cheese on 2 bagels. And then he had 5 eggs, right? And he's like, oh, I got to get my protein up because, I have to eat 10 meals a day. If I only eat 25 grams of protein a meal, I need to get 250 grams of protein. And there's only so much in milk. And he's like talking about
what the fuck?
And he's talking about like the pyramid of foods, right? That little thing you used to get in like grammar school, which shows you what your high proteins are, like on the top, and like the shitty proteins on the bottom. He's like, milk and whey protein isolate and steak and eggs are all your best protein sources. And he's like, on the bottom is like soy and wheat. He's like, you don't want any of that stuff. Well, I eat it sometimes, but you don't want it all the time. And I'm like it's just like 3rd grade, like nutritional advice,
How many thousands of kids are listening to this and copying this?
And he's got his little fitness pal out and he's like putting his little macros in, and I'm like shaking my head. I'm just like mind boggled by this stuff. And
I would be led to believe that he honestly just doesn't give a fuck, especially taking into consideration that he was, around those guys for what, a year or whatever. Also, like, I'm sure they relayed this stuff to him over and over.
Well, this is the thing. I'm not going to defend Fuad, but I am, unfortunately. And they told me, like, Ben even told me like they tried to change everything for him, and he wouldn't. He was stubborn, like he would not listen to any advice, and that's why I'm like, I'm not like trying to shit on Sam, right? Like I said, I'm just talking about his nutrition. It's garbage, and it's not a personal attack on the kid, but like let's look at the way he's changed since the last time the first time we seen him out there, like publicly. He hasn't evolved much, right? Yeah, he's heavier, but like his body's not changing as much. He lost his sponsorship because he was stubborn, didn't want to work, didn't want to do the workload, didn't want to renew, like all the bullshit, right? And now he's like, his views aren't like going up anymore. They're going down because like the videos don't change. There's just so many patterns, right? And it speaks to what he's doing with nutrition. Like he's stubborn and he won't change anything. The same thing with his content, the same thing with the sponsors, right? He doesn't want to do anything he doesn't want to do. And that's fine. But like he's leaving so much on the table, like for more for himself, you know, like, and maybe he doesn't care about that stuff, but he obviously cares about bodybuilding, which is mind boggling to me that he doesn't care about these things. Right.
Have you heard anything about the doses that he uses? Because I have my own theories, but I don't know anybody who knows them. I've never talked to him, so I can't speak to any type of educated guess on this other than what I see and what I'm familiar with. Have you heard anything about his doses or any idea of how he approaches PEDs?
He's been on for 5 years.
He took my nutritional advice as a teenager. I heard things, right, but I can't verify, right? I mean, like, there's a lot of things that go on. There's one person in particular that I would like say I would vouch for, like, say he's got credibility because he's very close to Sam. But again, maybe he's just feeding me bullshit, right? I mean, Sam is not light, basically, is what he told me. Like, he definitely pushes. He doesn't use growth hormone or insulin, but he definitely pushes like his anabolics and testosterone stuff. That's basically, and he really likes orals, supposedly. So
is he running blood work?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know about that one. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like he's one of the last, like he's probably the last client you would want because he's not coachable at all. I think he literally believes in exactly what he thinks is like the truth, and that's it, you know. And I think he's set on his ways. Because like from what the people told me that were around him, like he just thinks like his way is the best way, you know. And I don't see him competing. I don't think he'll ever compete. I really don't. I don't think he'll get to that point. He'll never get in shape. He's gonna be like I don't want to shit on Dr. Mike Israetel, but like Mike does the macro dieting thing, right, for his preps until I think what's his name came along, like eating bagels and stuff before a show and protein bars. Like I like Dr. Mike. We talk all the time, but like he didn't get in shape because he followed like a macro diet, right? It's just not going to work.
I know Jared Feather tries to help him, but
yeah,
you know, Jared even helped.
Jared.
He's like, Mike is stubborn. You know, sometimes he just wants to do it his way.
I could see Sam doing the same thing, like getting on stage and just being like a bag of donuts, you know, like watery and fluid everywhere, and you know, like
well, Sam's not never even competed. So I mean, you're saying. It seems like he loves bodybuilding. Maybe he doesn't know whether or not he actually loves bodybuilding. Maybe he just likes lifting and getting big, and that's why he doesn't want to do all the other shit.
Well, I think he still should eat better. I mean,
of course,
I would respect if he said like, I like to eat like this, because I'll even say this myself. I like to eat a certain way. I do this. Don't do it. It's not good for you.
You feel you like to eat a certain way.
I got better. But at least I'm honest about it. I'm not like, this is the best way. This is how I'm going to grow.
You're not
preaching. I don't know if he says it's the best way. Does he say that?
In so many words. He doesn't say it straight out. He won't ever say it straight out like that, but he'll beat around the bush as if like it's the most cost effective. It works the best. It's easy to digest. It tastes so good. Like, you know, those buzzwords that get people going, oh yeah, I can eat cream cheese for my fats, like fucking half a brick, you know, like.
You know what story this reminds me of? We talked about Marty earlier. Do you remember what Marty did to Dexter at the gym, the kid with the hearing aid?
No.
When he told him that the secret to getting big was eating a gallon of ice cream before bed every night. Then Dexter did that, and then came up to Marty. He's like, I've been doing it. He's like all broken out, and Marty's just like, Dexter, you're fat shit.
Lily had a rash. Lily had a rash of acne. Yeah. I just wish he'd be open-minded, because I don't care about what he does. I would like to see what he looks like as a freak, the kid Sam, like someone actually guiding him properly, you know, like he'd be a fucking absolute monster freak.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him. I know you wanted to talk about SEO, right? Phil's always telling me all these guys are using SEO, and you never hear anybody talk about it in this sport at all. It's like taboo. I know numerous pros. None of them have ever admitted to me about using it. And anytime I've asked them, they say they don't really know guys. Oh, some of these guys, I feel like they're not lying. So I want to see your perspective on this here.
So
before we get going, I just want to make a point to Sebastian because we had a disagreement about something. Nick, when somebody is clearly shooting a body part but doesn't want to admit they're using oil, what do they tell you they're doing?
Oh, site injections. Yeah.
I'm putting my gear there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was about to ask you. Are we defining? Is this conversation defined SEO as just oil?
Okay, for anybody listening, what exactly is SEO and what are different kinds that you know about?
You want me to go or you guys?
Yeah, anybody can go here.
So like SEO to me is just Synthol, which is just like cottonseed oil, grapeseed oil with other magic potion they put in there to like make sure the fucking shit doesn't absorb, right? Basically. Phil, you could probably speak on the exact ingredients they use, but like SEO is like all different Synthols have different formulas, right? Like I used to buy painless pumps and I would buy synthesize. I would buy, I don't remember all the fucking names. There was tons of them, but they all had different other like filler ingredients in them. And supposedly they promoted like nutrient transportation or some fucking bullshit language they would use, partitioning food into your muscle. Like some
posing oil.
Yeah, posing oil, like
not for injection, but with a rubber stopper on top.
Yeah, some scammy buzzwords that make you think you're putting something healthy in your body, right? So Synthol, when I learned about Synthol, right, it was used way more efficiently and like professionally, if that's the right word, right? People didn't overdo it. Like you wouldn't even know someone from the 2000s or 90s was using it, or during my time, because like they use it for touch up, right? You would only use it the last couple weeks or during prep to like volumize like some really small muscles that just weren't responding, or maybe when you diet hard, they go flat and they don't stay as full, like your arms or something, right? No one took it to the point where they're like injecting chest and back and legs and shoulder. Like it became like a way overdone thing, which ruined like the what's the right word? Like the nostalgia of it, right? Because like there were so many pros that did it, but they did it like so tasteful, right? You would never know. And the striations would still be there. The separation would still be there. And then like, you know, you're in a casual conversation. They'd be like, yeah, I did this before the show and it worked really well. And you're like, oh, so that's how I learned about it. So it was presented to me like a fucking a package like wrapped up in like 24 karat gold. Like this is what you do at the end, right? So that's all I used it for at the time. Like when I first started using it, I would do it before I did a show or a guest posing, and then it became doing it before nightclubs and then going to the beach, right? And your touch-ups become like all the time. Then you're like, wow, this stuff really fucking works, and my muscles don't fucking go, they don't go flat, they're always full, right? And then you start drawing the line to stand. You're like, well, how much damage is this fucking doing, right? Like, and like, it's not getting smaller, my arm. It's only getting bigger, and it's starting to get a little like blobby looking. Like it doesn't look like natural anymore. So that's when I started to realize, you know what, I probably should like scale this back and not do it as much anymore. But so like when it was presented to me, like I said, it was up for touch-ups, right? And I learned this because I was living in California at the time. Most people probably don't know who Charles Glass is, or Venice Gold, and like what it was back then. It was like bodybuilding, like heaven, right? You went there, saw the pro bodybuilders. There's a bunch of coaches there and trainers. Charles was like the trainer back then. And, you know, these were things that they were doing at the upper level of bodybuilding, right? When I was there. And I saw it with my own two eyes. I saw all your top pros, like every top guy in Olympia in the 2000s was in that gym training, right? They would come in for their prep, or they come for off season to train with Charles or Chris Cormier or whoever was there. And these were the things they were doing all the time. Like they would go up in the pump room in Gold's Venice, the posing room. They would do their injections of whatever SEO they're using, like hyaluronic acid or an oil or Caverjet or Nolotol or Esculin, like some type of shit. And they would go train, right? And then they would go pose afterwards and like see the fucking results. That was like the routine. So that's how I learned all about it, but they did it very tasteful. Like you would never know any of those guys were doing any of that stuff, all this pump and pose shit, right? And they would do it to the point where the body just looked better from it. It didn't get worse, right? And then all of a sudden we went through this whole generation of like overdoing it. Like Boston Lloyd, to be honest, rest in peace, he ruined it. Like the whole 3cc thing, like completely destroyed Synthol when he came out with his own and all that shit. And people were just like making their body parts look weird, right? And I started to overdo it myself because I started putting it in my calves. I fucked up my one calf from it, right? My one bicep just never gets a pump anymore. I'm sure there's like nerve damage right from it. I started to get like obsessed with it because honestly, it was immediate results. Like you did it, you went to the gym, your arms would like swell so much and your legs would swell so much. It was like, you're like, why would I not do this? Right. And no one knew. I'm like, no one had any idea that I was doing it. So I think Synthol has its place still. And I think it's still part of bodybuilding. I don't believe for a second that bodybuilders aren't using it anymore. And I just think either getting better at it or people aren't really looking for it. They don't know what to look for. But I still think it's a massive part of bodybuilding for sure. And nowadays they use hyaluronic acid a lot. Like that's pretty, you have to load a lot of it because it's water-based, but those like little touch-up things before the stage definitely work for sure.
And like Nick just said, I'm going to be the guy to say it. You know, I'll be the bad guy. People get mad at me if they want, but I tell the truth. And a lot of people would always go to Gold's Venice to train, you know, with certain trainers or special trainer, you know, the best trainer, this and that. Listen, Charles is a site injection expert. You know, he could do it. You would never see it. You would never know. And that's why if you ever see him at a show, that's why he's there. But he could do your back, he could do your rear delt.
Just for context, so people understand how meticulous it was, we would go into the posing room, and I'm talking about myself, not anyone else, just so people know. I would go into the posing room with him, and we'd have like 50 insulin syringes. I'm not kidding. Full, right? Like the small ones, you know, like for subcutaneous, right? And he would just go around everywhere, like with his little formula, supposedly, and inject whatever body part we're training that day, right? So he'd like literally load you with oil. I mean, like load you. Like it wasn't like a little bit amount, like, oh, dude, 1cc and go work out. Like you're training back, he's shooting up all your rhomboids, your lats, your teres, your traps. And you're like walking around, you literally can't move because you're like locked up, right? From all the injections. You do one set, you just like swelled up. And you're like, oh, this is what they fucking do, you know? But like, I mean, you name any top pro in the 2000s, you go down that list of the guys that lived in California, like everyone was doing it. Look what happened to Cutler's bicep before the Olympia that one year, remember? Fucking bruised up. You didn't fucking tear it. Like Dexter, he didn't fucking tear his bicep. He never got surgery. Like all those guys that went on stage with supposedly tears, like they did bad injections. Yeah, it's bad shots. And it happened.
And people are still doing it today. And you know what? I caught flack. I think it was on Quad's podcast where I actually pointed out the fact that Rami's quads had a ton of Synthol in them. People attacked me online, ripped me apart. Fawad told me he didn't believe me. Then guess what? Years later, Chad literally admitted it and said he was trying to get all of the scar tissue and all of the oil out to bring back his detail. And I'm still waiting on my apology for the thousands of people that attacked me because I was right. But, like his legs were loaded with Synthol. I remember tapping them and it was like a rock.
Yeah. They so like the bad part, Seb, is like, and all you guys obviously, but like what happens is people started combining their oils, like their injectable steroids with the Synthol in those areas. And that's where I noticed people's body parts started to really get deformed because they were mixing all that stuff into like their quads or their delts, and like absorption was a mess. Like the knots were getting crazy, infections were happening, right? And that's where it got really ugly, is when they started doing that. When I did it, I would keep like my Synthol in one area and my injections in another area. I would never put them in the same area, you know? So, or if I was using like water-based stuff, I would never put that in the same area as an oil. I tried to at least be as smart as I could with it. But again, there was like so many times where you're using so much of it, it's like almost impossible. Plus your injections, like you're going through like hundreds of needles a week, you know?
So now, say you're going to train, you're going to just do back, you're shooting up your whole back. What is the purpose of doing that? Why are you injecting it right before you hit back? What is that doing?
Scientifically, or what I thought at the time?
Is there a scientific answer?
I don't fucking know.
What did you think was happening?
Well, from what I was told when I was like in my 20s, it's stretching the fascia. That was like the buzzword. It was stretching the fascia. But I mean, it just caused like some local inflammation. I mean, that's all that was happening. And like, even if you did you know how it is, like you do I don't know if you guys do this, but I used to shoot my biceps with like whatever, prop or testosterone. I would go train. I'm like, oh, my pump is so much better. Yeah, just because it's inflamed from the fucking shot. Like it was, nothing else was like, there's no like local growth from putting my testosterone in my bicep before the workout, right? So, and then at the end of the day, the oil just wouldn't dissipate. So like I felt like it was working, which it kind of was. It didn't go anywhere because if I stuck it there, it's there. If I stuck it there, it's there, right? And I have these 2 lumps now. After a couple of days, it eventually like smooths out, right? But yeah, I mean that's what I thought at the time was happening, right?
So how long does it stay in you for?
Well, that's a good question.
Bro,
visibly, where you see the effect of it visibly.
I went to the airport one year when I was going to a show, and you know how you go and put your arms up and they scan you? My fucking biceps were lit up. I'm like not wearing sleeves. They're like, I guess the machine's broken. I'm like, yeah.
I
literally saw it.
That was the scary part about it. Like, as I started to get older and a little bit smarter and wiser at things, I'm like, well, when does this break down? Like, where does it go eventually, right? Because like everyone's like, oh, it's the healthiest thing to do because again, there's no steroids in it. Like nothing happens to you. And then like I see people fucking having problems with their liver shutting down, or kidney stones and kidney problems. Like it's got to break down eventually. Now, time frame, I think it depends on just literally how much you're like loading up, right? Like there was times I was super aggressive with it because I had the patience to do it, because you have to have a lot of patience, right? It's a lot of work. I used to call myself Picasso because like it was like a half hour, 45-minute ordeal before you worked out, like to do all these fucking injections, right? And you get to the gym, you're like, I don't fucking feel like working out after all that, you know? So the thing was, I went through periods of time where I was pushing it a lot, and there was times where I didn't do it at all because I just got lazy, to be honest with you. I mean, luckily for me, I can't speak on any side effects directly from using oil, right? But I've had so many friends that have bought oils like that, the Synthol, and literally like months later have like serious chronic problems, or, you know, with their internal organs because of whatever they were doing. And like, that's the only thing that's changed, right? So I don't know what was in it, bacteria or whatever was made wrong. I have plenty of people that have done that, right? So, but luckily me, like I said, I didn't have any issues with it. But again, we see guys like Piana and Boston, like they used, obviously Piana had like the PMA stuff in there too, but Rich was like big on oil first.
What's PMA?
PMAA, I think it is, right? PMAA.
Yeah,
right?
PMAA.
So it's like what they use for like butt lifts, basically. It's like
it's what they use for a BBL, but it's like super thick, and supposedly the body just can't absorb it because it's so like a gel.
Yeah, and they use like a caulk gun. It looks like a fucking caulk gun when they fucking stick it in you. So it's like this. It's this really thick fluid that they like, and it's got like little beads. It looks like little, like, you ever see Dippin' Dots ice cream?
Yeah.
It like literally looks like that, like super fine little things, and they like expand once it gets like in your muscle. But yeah. Phil, fucking Rich did his chest, his traps, his shoulders, his arms. That's why his arms never changed ever. Like they just stayed one size.
It's a very big thing in Brazil. So if you see some of the up-and-coming Brazilians, not all of them do it, but you could see some of them are really, really overdoing it because the muscle just doesn't have the shape that matches the rest of the body. Like, they'll do a decent job, but they'll just overdo it, and it's just like, what the hell?
Yeah. But that stuff is terrible for you.
So SEO, Synthol, what is it called? Painless pump, stuff like that. That's not a permanent thing.
No.
It's semi-permanent. I mean, right? Like, For me, it would last a couple months if I loaded on it, right? Yeah. But like, if you do, like, listen, nothing is going to happen if someone went and bought a bottle of Synthol and did one injection. You're not going to notice anything doing one injection. Like, you have to do it over like basically a cycle. If you were going to cycle a steroid, you would do like an 8-week stint with this oil doing, you know, let's say a half a cc, and then you titrate the doses up. You do like an 8-week blast with it, and then you stop, you know, or something like that, right?
So it takes weeks to see the effects from
when you first do it, the muscle is insanely tight and it's painful. So you have to give that time to kind of open up and then loosen up, and you can, I've injected my bicep and I couldn't like extend my arm completely.
Yeah, no,
and then really you got to massage it and it's got to like open up before you can even do your next one.
Yeah.
Like it takes time.
It's a pain in the dick. It really is. It's a pain and literally a pain, you know?
So then how do they use Esculin? Because I thought Esculin was only to be used backstage before the show, and that's what they used to use.
So from my experience using it, it's water based, and it I think Esculin was for the baby surgeries, right? Phil, it was for the baby surgery. Yeah. So they would transport like red blood cells and blood to like one area of the body when they were doing a pregnancy. That's what they used it for. And so people thought, oh, it's just for fucking bodybuilding, right? Let's inject into fucking muscle. And Esculin, so there was guys that and myself that would do it like 1 to 2 to 3 days prior before a show. Specifically just because like you didn't want to risk doing an injection too close to a show. Like it obviously would bruise, it would inflame, it might get red, right? Whatever. So when you're that lean, like the injections could just like get inflamed for no reason, right? So I typically wouldn't do it on show day. There's plenty of people that did. They would literally do it backstage. Like I'd be in the bathroom and they'd be fucking shooting up in the bathroom. So but that would last like 24, 48 hours, 72 hours around there. And that literally would just inflame your muscle. Like it would just like literally, you would shoot it, right? And you would be getting ready for the gym and your arm would just get so pumped, like your veins and the vasodilation would just be insane. You go to the gym, you do like one set, you literally couldn't move. It was wild, the Esculin stuff. Like that was
painful,
the best because it didn't blur your muscle. It didn't ruin your striations. It didn't make your muscles look all weird, funky shape. And it was literally like very temporary, like days, right? But then like obviously doing something like that, you're like, okay, well, I'm spending all this money doing all these injections. Like it's got to be for a particular reason. You're not just going to do it like on a random workout, you know?
It was very, very, very popular in the 90s. And I'm going to tell a story. Now, listen, this is not firsthand experience. I'm not saying this is a fact. I've heard this from more than a few credible sources, but who knows? But in the 90s, it was very prevalent, and Kevin Levrone was very big on it. And funny story, everybody always got it from this one source, and I was told that one year for the Olympia, Levrone just completely bought the source out, so nobody else could get it. And then everybody else in the lineup was furious because they couldn't get it. He had bought it all. But supposedly, Kevin Levrone was enormous on using Esculin.
Yeah, Cormier used to tell me all the stories about all of them, like Sean and Kevin and like Milos. Milos talked about it too all the time. Flex. Yeah, Flex was.
Yeah. I heard Flex had no calves, that it was all Esculin.
Well, there was a rumor for a while that went around he got like implants and they made him take them out. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think he just loaded them up with oil. I think honestly that's what happened.
Well, I know Flex's entire back was done with Esculin before the show.
Oh yeah, Flex was huge.
That open back double bicep that had some help.
Yeah, if you look at Flex's biceps, even now they look fucking weird. Like they're just oddly big and swollen for no reason. Like there's something else in them for sure. Like he had no forms at all. It was just all fucking bicep and tricep.
Okay, well now this begs the question. I want you to answer it, Kyle, first, since I haven't heard you speak this whole time.
It's been a minute.
Do you think the SEO is needed at the top level of bodybuilding in today's standards?
I think it's needed when used appropriately. I think anyone would say, hey, this definitely helped the look. Now, when you say needed at the top level, I think there are guys that still have areas of improvement or weaknesses. Like some people, someone like Urs has no arms, right? Yeah. So someone like him, I think it can't hurt him. It can only make it better. But if he does it the wrong way and it blurs the definition and it looks horrible, then I'd say that's a problem. I think Hadi, I don't know if he was shooting his shoulders with oil, but they were kind of pointy the one year. I think he got docked down for it. Yeah. Now, could it have been Nolotol? Could have been some other SEO? Sure, maybe it was just a bad pin. But the chances are that close to a show is probably something that was trying to enhance that didn't dissipate right away, because usually most people are cutting injections a couple of days out, so nothing could happen for the most part. So you got to think, if you had a bad injection before the show, you were doing something to enhance and inflame the area. So I think for sure it's helpful on those body parts. Now, do people get carried away? Like if you would ask me why, I have some people use it before? Yeah, I've had people use things. But again, in the day and age, and depending on the age of my client and the experience, kids are not patient. They just they hear something's going to work. They're like, okay, and then they abuse it and they're fucking stupid. So it's just, hey, this is why I can't give you this, because you're just like a adolescent. You're just going to eat candy all night. That's why you need a babysitter. So that's the truth of it. So I just try to pretend I'm naive to it, but I know it would help, and at the right person at the right time, for sure.
So do you think that, or have you seen the majority of competitors at that level are actually using it in today's standards? Because it's not talked about at all. I think a lot of people just assume that people who use Synthol are either only in open, or they're those guys who look like freaks, or these guys are just only running gear. Like, it just doesn't seem like people are aware of the presence of this.
So I would say, from my credible sources, people that have told me how to use Null, I got in the other room now, and I have it. So I know what it does, how it's used. They use it, some of them, for sure. Now, do I think everyone needs it, like a Nick Walker? No. Right? He's a freak. He always had the same. You can tell when someone's body part, if you look, what I always like to do, whether someone goes to a new coach or they come out of nowhere, I try to see where they started to understand, like, hey, that person is definitely blasting shit. They all of a sudden started changing, whether it's growth hormone, usually for most people, or a body part all of a sudden in 1 year blew up, and they've been lifting for 12 years and they had shitty body part, and now all of a sudden perfect. That's not a better training thing, or I neurologically found my exercises that I connect to. You're fucking doing something, right? So I think, are most people like, does Chris and stuff like that? No, they're not. They're just genetically gifted. They have very good shape, and it's been very consistent. But I think people, they've used it for sure.
I think today's competitors, the circle of competitors, I think a lot of them sight inject their gear thinking it's going to make a difference too. Mm-hmm. Like they're obsessed with that. And does it work? I can't prove it works. I just don't suggest it, because I think it's going to lead to like more damage than good at the end of the day, because of the amount of scar tissue and hitting a nerve by accident. Like, you know how delicate your biceps and triceps are. Have you ever tried an injection there? Like, it's fucking ruthless if you hit something, right? And I just don't see the juice is not worth the squeeze putting your juice literally in your arms. Like, it's not. Like, you're going to cause way more damage than you are going to get something out of it. If you're going to put anything in your arms, at least do it with something that's going to make a visible difference. Like, and you're going to get something out of it, because the gear is just going to absorb. Like, you're not getting any benefit out of that. So, but to point to what Kyle was saying, I think timing is everything with, like he said, with individuals, because some people get obsessive. Like I did. I could say I was as a kid. As soon as I found something that worked, I tripled down on it. Like, I was like, do more. And when you're that young, like, and you're that influenced by the results you're getting and people around you, like, you just want to succeed and you're obsessed with that. And you get in this mind fuck of, if I don't do it, I'm not going to be successful. I have to go up. I have to do this. And it's a really bad place for a kid to be in, because they don't understand the risk or the end result of where that's going to lead to. And especially with the oil, like, you can permanently fuck something up if you don't know what you're doing. Like, sometimes there's no turning around after that, if people go overboard with it, as we've seen, So
I agree with both what Kyle and Nick have said as far as use, not abuse. I think that there is a right way to do it. I think if you're doing it surgically, you're not going to see it. There's a lot of people right now that are using it that nobody here watching this podcast realizes that they're using it, because they've done such a good job with it and they've done it very slow. Do I do it with clients? Yes, I do. I've used it with clients numerous times through the years, and you'll never guess which client, because not a single detail was lost, not a single striation was lost, because it's got to be a patient process. It's got to be a little bit at a time. If you start inflating a muscle, then it's going to look like a balloon. It's going to look like crap. You could go back and look at my 2015 USA pictures where I look like I had Marcus Rule biceps. I overdid it a little bit. Everybody was laughing. They were like, yeah, but it looks really cool. I'm like, yeah, but I got marked down for it, because the judges just knew that I didn't put 2 inches on my arms in a year. So, so to that point,
you got to pace yourself. You got to pace yourself.
You got to pace yourself. But as Nick said, with the gear, what people don't realize is there's solvents in the gear too, and that can damage the muscle tissue and cause scar tissue. So it's a terrible idea to use your gear in your arms. And if anybody's using gear in their arms, you're going to know pretty quickly, because the scar tissue is going to build up. But again, that's the lie that a lot of people like to say when they get caught using SEO and something looks abnormal. I had a tear, I was fixing it, I put my gear in there. No, that's not the truth.
Yeah. That's the first thing everyone says, it's gear. Like with Hadi too. Like, we can't, and the thing is, you can't prove, you don't know if Hadi's shoulders are pointy from, using an SEO or just his gear, right? And the sad part is when I see someone like Hottie doing it, like making an amateur rookie mistake like that, like having a pointy shoulder at the Olympia when you're like, I'm just like, why are these things happening at that? I understand mistakes happen, right? But like, there's no reason why to play Russian roulette when you look like Hottie. Like, why are you putting something in your delt that close to a show, or at all for that close to a show? Like, just play it safe. But I still think it's widely used. I don't want to say it's abused, but it's definitely widely used everywhere with the competitors for sure. And the sad part is there's so many girls that I know that use Synthol now. Like, it's absolutely mind-boggling to me with their shoulders for like bikini or wellness for their legs and glute. I'm like this would never ever happen like 10 years ago with women using Synthol. It's wild to me.
I actually tried to use Synthol in my legs at one point, and I stopped very, very quickly because I realized, like, I went to go train legs and it was so tight. I'm like, I'm going to get a fucking tear. Then I went to go flex my legs. There was no line. Like, the lines were gone. And I'm
I tried my quads. It was painful.
And I'm like, this is starting to look worse and worse and worse. So then I ended up pushing my shows back that year because I didn't want to. I wanted to let it dissipate. I'm like, I'm not getting on stage like this. It looks like fucking hell. Yeah. You know, you lose all your detail, all your lines. The muscle doesn't flex. You can't train. You know, and I don't know how people actually do that effectively. But I mean, I guess they do. But I mean, it's a clear sign of somebody doing that is when you see a really sharp line in the VMO, but then there's no separation in the sweep. Like, so, they put it in the sweep.
I was going to ask you guys. I want to hear what you guys think. Like, there's so many unnatural looking quads nowadays in open bodybuilding, maybe in classic too, but
it's oil.
Like, they're just literally like shelves at the bottom. Like, their teardrop is like a square, or like their sweeps all of a sudden just like stop, supposedly, right? At the part of the, and like, I get it. Some people have like lower attachments and insertions. I get it. But like, these are like hard lines. Like, I've never seen a muscle do that before. Like,
and
they're so bottom heavy too, the quads. It's weird looking.
The crazy thing about doing the quads is when I tried to do it, you've got to do so much to see just a little fucking difference. I'm like, this is going to destroy my kidneys. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, I think I did 3 cc's in 3 different spots down the leg.
Oh, yeah.
You can barely fucking see it. I'm like, how often do I have to fucking do this for this to work?
Yeah.
You know, but like, I'm telling you, these guys are loading their legs up. It's probably hundreds, if not thousands of cc's.
If you look at quads now, they're so different looking shape-wise. I'm not saying like, I'm not comparing I just mean like the development of the legs doesn't look normal. It's not like a natural looking leg. Like, it has weird lines to it. It doesn't make sense. Like, it defies all laws with anatomy. It just doesn't make any sense. It's weird looking.
I'd have to see what you're talking about.
I can tell you right now, I'm not going to give a name because I don't want to out anybody or make anybody feel bad or look bad, but there's a Mr. Olympia in one of the divisions that literally built their physique on Synthol. And you can kind of tell if you really think hard about it, but
I guess you have two options.
He did such a good job. No, I'm not. Listen, I said any division. So there's multiple for them. I'm not talking about bodybuilding, but it's such a good job that it looked like. I remember talking to one of the judges that was on the panel, and we talked about it, and his answer to me was, "Yeah, but how fucking awesome did that look?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're kind of right. It really did." Like, he just is, because I don't think that it's cheating. You know, everybody's doing it. It's just a matter of, are you doing it right? Are you abusing it? Or are you using it properly, just like any other tool?
Well, the thing is, you can't prove it, right? Number one, unless you admit it. And number two, like, they can just chalk it up and be like, "Oh, I did my site injections in my gear. That's why it looks like that." Yeah. But this is the thing, and I want people to understand this. I don't think we've said it yet. When it comes to Synthol, you can't create muscle with it, right? So, like, if you've never worked out or you just started working out, don't expect to go use Synthol when you're like 18 to 20 years old and all of a sudden you're going to have arms that you never had. Like, there has to be tissue there. Like, this is like a finishing product, like putting polish on a car, right? So don't try to build your physique using oil. Like it's going to be a really bad ending to that story.
Well, I can tell you firsthand that it doesn't work, because towards the end of my bodybuilding career, like I've always had to use a little bit of oil in my arms because my arms were terrible. They just would not grow no matter what the hell I did. So if I wanted to compete, I had to use it. I used it to shape. I really didn't try to inflate it. But here's what happened. In my later years, when I got shoulder injuries, so now I was having atrophy issues because of my shoulder injury. So the muscle was actually shrinking. So I was trying to compensate with oil, but you can't inflate. You can't do that when there's no muscle there. There's got to be muscle there to be able to make it look good. If there's no muscle and you try to fix the problem with Synthol, it looks awful. It looks terrible.
There's definitely way less risk when you have a good amount of tissue and you touch up things, right? If Kyle mentioned Urs before, I was dissing his arms the other day, like how bad they are still. And I'm not trying to make fun of them, but they're just still not good. And I'm like, if Urs went out there and just started loading his arms right now, it'd be so obvious, it would look terrible, right? So, and his arms just like, I think it's not even the amount of muscle he has, just his attachments and his insertions are just like weird on his arms. So I don't think they're ever going to look filled out for his frame, to be honest with you. But, I mean, do you guys think you can bring, like, let me ask you guys, can Urs bring up his arms to be equal to everything else? I don't think so, right?
Urs needs to go to open. It's over for him.
I agree with that 100%. He should go to open. Yeah, I think so.
Yes,
do you think his arms could grow at that point, or you think they're just still going to be small?
They can grow, but they'll never. What?
I think he can pose and compensate for it, right? So, like, I would probably try to sight enhance them if I was Urs, and then backstage I would use some Esculin, and then I'd pump the living hell out of him. But the thing is, he's got a lot of other great body parts.
Yeah, crazy body.
I would make everything else phenomenal, and then I would just do whatever I could to try to make those arms match in size, and then I would just make sure everything else had the attention: his shoulders, his quads, his detail, his separation, his back, his phenomenal posing, because he knows how to pose for his angles. Yeah. So I think that he could get away with it, if he did it right.
I mean, obviously he could grow them. I think it would always, no matter what you did, be a weak point on his physique.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but you know what? Look, Chris Bumstead's arms are his weakest body part. They're probably the worst. They're probably the worst arms in Classic, but he's unbeatable, right?
Yeah, his shape sucks on Chris's arms.
Yeah, but his question was his arms, not if he's gonna win.
No, my point is, like, that's somebody who has terrible arms, but was still able to destroy everybody by making the arms good enough and then having everything else insanely good.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how good C-Bum did without arms, to be honest with you. Like, it's actually pretty phenomenal. And all the body parts he's torn and been able to keep his body still looking good. It's fucking impressive. Is Urs still doing Classic this year? And I've not been following him all. Is he still doing Classic this year?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think he needs to just take a little bit of time off. He's
competed every year since he started. No,
well, things got messed up with 19 being around, right? So I remember those. I think the Arnold was pushed back that year.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So when I saw him last year, we trained at a gym, and he was just like nonstop. He was like in prep. So when you don't give yourself time to grow, how is he going to make improvements, right? So
doesn't he hit like 280?
Yeah, he can't make improvements because he has to cut like 50, 60 pounds every time.
Yeah. He needs time to really solidify new muscle if he's building it, and then it's just hard to kind of get down into that body weight. But then again, every year or two they keep moving the weight cap, so who really knows?
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, I think his arms would definitely be a lot better if he didn't cut 50 pounds and and actually took a year off to like just pace himself a little bit. Yeah, it's too much. It's way too intense.
Now, you know what? I was actually curious what your thoughts are on this, because I know you're pretty educated on it and you're able to like identify things through experience through years. Do you think that the Classic Olympians are using similar doses to the Open Olympians now?
I mean, let's be honest here. Their conditioning is superb, right? I would love to see, but also we know, obviously, we're all experienced enough to know that like once you get that much tissue too for open, you lose your separate. Like it's just not the same look. When you have that much muscle on you, it's never going to look like as clean and chiseled as a Classic physique guy, like 50 pounds smaller. It doesn't translate the same, And some guys can like, some guys have better separation stuff when they get really big, but like open bodybuilding is just about like muscle mass and just being in shape, right? Like you're not going to have like the etched out look like Uris has or Chris has. Like it's just not possible, I don't think. But gear wise, I think in the off season, they're probably not like a guy that's already at the weight cap. I don't think they're going to be pushing the pedal as hard, but I think when it comes to prep drugs, fuck yeah. Like they're, I don't think they're fucking holding back on anything. I think
and that's the point that I was going to ask you, because we all know that when you have to get peeled, there's no possible way you're holding on to every bit of muscle that you have.
Yeah.
And the level of peeled that they're getting to and still holding on to all that muscle, what are they doing to hold on to that much muscle and get to that level of peeled?
I mean, their conditioning is like, I don't like Michael DeBull's physique for classic, but I like his physique, right? If that makes sense. And I saw him compete last week and I was like, holy fuck. Like he had some impressive fucking conditioning. Like it was mind boggling shredded. Right. And I'm like, and he's not small anymore. Like he got really fucking jacked. And I was like, I can't believe that's even classic at this point. Right. Like he looked huge for classic. Yeah. His legs are not like as proportionate to the upper, but like inside out, like, I mean, like wildly shredded. And I was like, damn, like classic is pretty much just bodybuilding now with a weight cap. I mean, it's not.
What do you got to do to hold on to that type of muscle mass and get to that condition?
Yeah, it's wild looking. Like that was crazy. Yeah, I don't think they're holding back on the pre-contest shit, right? They may be a little healthier because maybe because C-Bum, not to use him as an example all the time, but he doesn't look like he's like aggressive in the off season. And I know he has like autoimmune issues and all that other stuff. He's a little more safe than the other guys, right? But he's not pushing the envelope in the off season. So like, is it as dangerous as an open bodybuilder? I don't think so, because like they're not carrying as much weight most of the time, right? And they're not probably heavy duty in the off season because they can't get too muscular for obviously the weight cap. So, but I don't think for a second a guy that's coming up into classic is taking any shortcuts. I think there's no way it's healthier.
Now, here's a good question that I wanted to ask, and this is pure speculation, so this is just going to be opinion. We don't know this for sure, which is based on what we think, experience, people that we've talked to. Like I know a lot of pros throughout the year. Nick's known a lot of pros throughout the year. We've been close with a lot of people, so we have a pretty good idea of what people do. Nick, what do you think is the average amount of grams used in a cycle for an open Olympian?
On the low end, I would say.
No, I'd say average. Average. What do you think the average guy is taking on that stage?
I would say anywhere between like 3 to 4 grams.
I agree.
I mean, that's probably low.
Yeah.
It's like you start adding up. Like I remember being on, for my own personal opinion, like probably 10 drugs at a time, 12 drugs at a time for a show. Like you talk about like everything, like aromatase inhibitors and fat burners and hardeners and testosterone and growth hormone. It's like you have so many fucking drugs and things are coming and going as you get into shape, and it adds up quick, like really quick. It's not even hard to hit that number.
I don't know if you remember this, but you and I were in my living room in 2017, and God rest his soul, love the guy, Dallas McCarver, was on speaker with us. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember this. He told us how much tren and mast he was taking for his whole prep for the Olympia. And it was quote unquote, my coach fucking told me to, or some shit like that. But it was 2 grams of tren, 2 grams of mast drive. And me and Nick looked at each other and were like, fuck.
Yeah. And he did that for like 3 months. Like it wasn't like it was the whole prep. It wasn't 2 weeks like before. Like it wasn't like he was peaking his body like that. That was,
and that's just the 2 compounds. We not even talking about everything else.
Oh, Dallas. I mean, I don't want to like spew all of his like business. I mean, I've talked about this several times, but like I remember Dallas telling me he would run 3-4 grams of just testosterone a week. I mean, that was like that was normal for him when he was like.
But it's not just him though. That's a lot of these guys.
Yeah, it's not just Dallas. No.
You get to this level, everybody's got good genetics. Everybody eats their food. Everybody trains hard now. And nowadays, everybody's got a good coach. So what's going to be that X factor that makes you able to stand with everybody else? Because if you've got 5 guys over here that are willing to bang 5 grams and you're not, they're probably going to beat you as long as your health can take it.
Well, yeah. And I think the biggest thing is like, are you responding to it? Right? Like when I see a kid smashing like 3 grams and he doesn't change, I'm like, let's pull the plug. Like, you're not responding to anything. Either your drugs are completely fake or your androgen receptors just suck. Like, you're not meant for growing. So let's stop doing this before you drop dead. You know, like, you're not getting any benefits out of this. You're going to drop dead and you're going to be like 100 pounds still. Like, what are we doing?
What do you like to do as a coach if somebody's not responding to high doses of anabolics?
Drop them.
Well, so like, I want to add some context to that. Like, I never just throw someone on a high dose. Like, we always titrate up, right, over time, and they'll eventually get to that point. And if I see after like 6 to 10 months, nothing is happening as we've been titrating up, I'm going to tell them straight up, be like, hey bro, like, this is probably not for you, or let's get some new gear. Let's try that and start over. Like, it doesn't matter what you like. This is the worst, the most annoying thing. Well, my blood work says this. My testosterone is 46,000. I'm like, I don't fucking care. You're not growing. Like, I don't care what your testosterone level is. Like, you're not responding to anything that we're doing. So why would you keep doing this? Like, you haven't put on any tissue at all. Like, you're the same size. You haven't gained a pound. And that happens all the fucking time. Like, there's more of those people than genetic responders like Dallas McCarver. Like, there's way more people like that. And I think that's the biggest misconception with bodybuilding. Like, everyone can be a bodybuilder. Just take drugs and eat. Not at all. Like, most people do not respond to the drugs as well. And I'm talking about the guys that are like the outliers that take their training serious, that take their nutrition serious, they take their rest serious. They don't do any recreational drugs. They sleep at fucking night at 8 o'clock and wake up at 8 o'clock the next day, get 12 hours of sleep. Like, these are the kids that are like living and breathing bodybuilding and still don't see results. So it's more common than people think. And I think that's like really hard for most guys to stomach, because they think they can do it just because, like, oh, I have drugs, or I have this coach, or I have the perfect training program. You can line all those things up. It doesn't mean diddly shit. It really doesn't.
We're in the only sport where people think that, like, if I took Ronnie Coleman's doses, I'm going to look like Ronnie Coleman. No one thinks like, oh, if I do what Usain Bolt did, I could run as fast as Usain Bolt. Like, nobody thinks that. But for some reason in the sport, everybody thinks that if I take what this guy must have beat me because he's taken more. No, a lot of times that's not the case. Yeah. You know, I mentioned earlier, because I'm friends with Hunter Labrada. We competed in the same show when he turned pro. I was taking more than him at that show, you know, probably by 500-600 milligrams more. And he destroyed everyone, and I wasn't even close. So, like, it's not always about that. It's about genetics, responsiveness, things like that. But yeah, listen, I tell people all the time, there's 100 people in your gym right now on juice, and you don't know they are.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys, Seb and Kyle, can you speak to that? Like, do you get, Kyle especially, you get a lot of younger guys. Like, do you have more guys responding well or not responding well to like the drugs?
Well, you gotta, what you see on social media, right, are just the ones that always respond. I don't use
right. Yeah,
those are obviously the billboards. They obviously do respond. The ones that are using stuff. There are a lot of people that don't respond very well. And again, sometimes it's not that they're not responding well, it's that they don't do the other shit very well. Most people, again, can't follow a plan the way people could follow a plan back in the day. Maybe because they get caught up seeing someone like Sam eat a certain way, or they're just so focused on the scale, and then they just look like shit. They just get really fat. And then, they're up 40, 50 pounds. But guess what? What goes up comes down. So now you diet it down, and hey, you're 2 pounds heavier. Like, you suck. You wasted your health, and the process is not healthy. So oftentimes that happens, I'd say, for sure. People, you have the population that does respond pretty well. And then you have the population that, this isn't for you. So that's what I usually tell people. At some point, you're dieting and you're prepping and you're doing all of the things I asked, right? So I can go above and beyond, say, hey, let me see your sets. Send me your sets. Okay. Every
training,
see a logbook. Things that I wouldn't have to do for the genetic responder, but I have to do for this person because let's just say they're average genetics. And if it's still not working then hey, this isn't for you. Like, stop wasting your time because it's fucking stupid. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Kyle, I'm sure you get this. I was going to say, Kyle, I'm sure you get this question a lot because you have the younger crowd that really follows you. You're pretty much like the influencer coach in the entire industry. Kids probably hit you up all the time. Do you think I can be an Olympian? Do you think I can be Mr. Olympia, this and that? And I actually said on my story, like recently, I said, my thought was like, they're asking that because they already know the answer and they're hoping you're going to say something different. If you really have that type of potential, you probably know, and everybody in your life has probably already told you. But
that's
what do you think?
Yeah.
So I mean, your question is, do I get a lot of people that ask?
You get a lot of kids asking you, like, what do you think my potential is? And
I'd say like of the 10 inquiry calls I go through, a day, 80% of people that are competing, hey, I want to be a pro. Like, I want to be an Olympian. Yeah. Everyone wants to, which is, again, if you didn't want to and you're thinking about competing, unless you were a fat kid like me, just want to get in shape on stage and just say you did it, cool. But you should obviously want to be a pro. However, when I talk to someone, hey, what's your experience? Well, I'm 25. I've been lifting for 10 years. Oh, because you don't look like you ever lifted before. So now I'm concerned, right? It doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of people that are younger now also. They're like SARM goblins. I don't know how your take on SARMs are, but it's something. I don't know if they're as potent as pro.
We're going to coin that term.
But people are always taking 90% of people that go to the gym, at least the gyms I go to, higher profile gyms, they're taking something. Yeah. And 90% of people in the gym don't look like they take something. So that says something, right? So
I would say the vast majority of clients that I get that are enhanced, the majority of them are not, they don't not respond, but they're not anything where the majority of people just have an average mediocre response to gear, right? It's not like they take gear and like, holy shit, like this is a 90 difference. A lot of them will feel differences within the gym and their performance, but what we actually see play out in terms of progression, there's very few guys where it's like, holy shit, like, okay, like you could be a pro, you could actually do this. Yeah. And then I guess from that point, it's usually just explaining what the situation is after so long and assessing their risk tolerance. Like, hey, are you trying to actually go pro and take this in that direction? Or do you just enjoy lifting and want to take gear and get huge? Because those are two different things, and understand where your priorities really are and the amount of risk you're willing to take. If you're not a competitor, probably not going to ever tell you to blast trend, right? It's not needed. So it just depends. But yeah, very few people have Olympian genetics, pro genetics.
Yeah. I think the reality is it takes the average person a very long time to build a physique that's worthy of admiring, right? So when I get the 17, 18-year-olds, hey, I want to look this way. I want to look like Anton. Well, guess what? You don't have his genetics. He's a freak. He's literally the youngest pro in the classic division for a reason, not because he started 10 years ago. He just responds very well, and he's meticulous and does all the things that a normal person needs to do to even make any results. But he has superior genetics, so he responds even more. But the reality is, I think I mentioned it on a prior podcast with you guys, if you're taking steroids for 10 years, I'd hope you have some size to you, right? So when people are like, hey, can I turn pro? Yeah, if you keep trying until you're 35 and you're masters, probably. Yeah. Because that's the reality. If you compete for 15 years, you're taking drugs for 15 years, I would hope you can get somewhere. But again, also, people are not willing to put in that kind of time. They look at it, hey, I'll do this from 20 to 25. I'll get a career, get a kid, I'm done. Yeah. The people that respond very well, you see right away, like, holy shit, this person's like blowing up a year or two,
Do you think there's, everyone has like their specific window to peak? Like obviously Anton, for an example, since you brought him up, made me think of it. He was able to put on a lot of muscle, but it's muscle maturity. It's not just like muscle, like spongy, soft, like doughy looking 20. How old's Antoine? 20. How old's the kid?
19.
19. Like he has muscle density and separation and clarity, like a fucking full blown Olympia pro bodybuilder that's been doing it for 15. Like, you know what I'm saying? He peaked really early. So I was just curious what you guys thought. Do you think everyone's window's a little bit different? Like for me, I turned pro at 25. I never looked like Antoine ever, let alone being at 19 years old looking like that.
Well, I would think that that's just a genetic component, like how thick his skin is, and that allows him to have that level of condition. I don't know, Kyle, obviously you know him much better, but
well, there's also a level of muscle fullness and quality that goes to it, right, Kyle?
His quality is crazy. Like
his quality of muscle, that takes a long time for most people to achieve if they can achieve it.
If they can achieve it
before, I've never looked like that. I've taken way more stuff than he has for a way longer time. I don't look like that. So it's just like at some point, again, it's an anomaly. It's like the LeBron of basketball, a Derek Jeter. You can say, or Tom Brady, all the elite people. You're not going to look like that.
Yeah, so. but this is the question. Mm-hmm. Does Antoine get better or does he burn out? Because, and I'm not saying burn out because you're doing things wrong or anything like that. I just mean, can he get better? Like, where does his physique go? Like, he's only 9. Like, is he at 30 years old still making progress?
So I think there's a limit of how good you can get. If you look at the bigger guys in the sport, not many people at the top level are making superior improvements. They're just coming back a little bit better. And as you know, the more cycles you take, for people that are listening, usually your first cycle should be your best cycle. If you do it right, you should gain the most amount of muscle, and you don't need to take a lot of stuff. And you'll always look back, anyone that's experienced doing it, you take way more when you're older, you don't respond the same.
Nope.
Now, whether that's because your receptors are worn out, your body's just used to how you lift and how you treat it, I don't think anyone's ever going to know, because all the studies are never on a meathead that was in a controlled environment for 10 to 15 years taking steroids. It doesn't exist. So I think with Anton, will he get better? I mean, he's under my tutelage, so of course he's
yeah.
So I think the quality of muscles because of my training style, but the reality is I think as long as he's committed, I think he has at least 4 to 5 years that he can continue improvements. But
do you think if Antoine started at 25 doing this, and this is just like a hypothetical, I'm not saying there's facts behind this, like, do you think he would have had the same result? Do you think literally he hit it at the right time, like had the right environment, the right like, you know what I'm saying? Because Cody Montgomery, I don't know if you guys remember who he is, right? Super young guy, won every fucking teen show, and then all of a sudden just fell off the face of the fucking planet at like 20, whatever he was. He did 212 like a couple times at Open, I think once or something, but like won Mr. USA, like everyone's like, he's the next Jay Cutler, and then just disappeared, right? And I just feel like there's guys that can peak so early, and then there's guys that peak later. Like Roden won his Olympia at like what, 40, whatever, 40 something, right? Took like all those years off in his 30. Yeah, like I just think it's so interesting to think about like when guys peak and they're at their best versus like other ages, and like, it's interesting to think about because
you're using the example of Cody. Did you know Cody?
Yeah.
Okay, so I imagine from what I remember, this is a long time ago, Cody was significantly bigger than how big Anton is. Is that correct?
He was, I mean, he was 225 or something, I think, at USA's or something crazy.
So I remember he fell off the face of the earth, but I feel like maybe that had something to do with him trying to push so hard and developing some type of complications from just doing everything in full force from the get-go at an age. I don't think Anton's done that. So I feel like it's probably a different situation. I don't know if that's just my
we're just hypothetically talking.
I think, so to answer Nick's question, which is an interesting and a good one for sure, we don't obviously know. We'll never know for sure. Yeah. Waited 5 years. I think he's got those genetics, just his bones are lighter. I mean, the kid was 91 pounds on stage. When we do a pro show next year, he'll be 10 pounds heavier. As long as it's in the right places, he'll continue to make those improvements. But at some point, I guess going back to the quality of muscle, he didn't look 190. He won the overall. He beat guys that were 240. I see them backstage. I'm like, holy shit, this kid is like triple your size. But on stage, it's an illusion, and it looks really good. And he's super efficient. So I think a lot goes into it in terms of the degree and severity of the progress you can make. So I think someone like Cody or people that get overzealous, I think the maturity factor plays a role. I mean by that, not to say someone's immature, but the desire to do better. Sometimes you get the spotlight on you. Fuck, I need to get better. I need to get better. And you burn out. Anton, after the show, was on the top of the world. You would have, the best kid. He was getting media outlets posting him that are just like top of the line media outlets that post like celebrities only. And he was a little burnt out. He needed a little break. He was just like, I feel like I don't want to bodybuild anymore. And I was just like, really? Like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, people are saying, hey, I want to look like him. What do I do? And we have the kid himself saying, I'm a little burnt out. He didn't push something for a long period of time. It just becomes a little overwhelming sometimes.
For sure.
From a larger scale, like, what am I going to do with my life? Am I just going to take drugs the next 10, 15 years, So I think people get caught up again with trying to make crazy progress, and they don't. It's you versus you. I know you compete against other people on stage, but if you're not getting better and you know you're checking the boxes, there's a time and a place where, hey, this doesn't work. Just like I think, Phil, you mentioned, as we all get to a certain age, and I kind of even notice, unfortunately, somewhat as I'm in the gym, I feel like I just can't get any better, right? Or at least when I was in it, or people's backs start fading, their quads start fading, they lose the sweep. They're not doing anything wrong. You're still training hard. You're still taking more drugs maybe. It's just your body starts to wear down. So there's a time limit on that.
Well, sarcopenia sets in, and we know that it's age-related muscle loss. But I think, again, to this topic, before we move on from it, is the fact that people have a misconception that because somebody is so good early, that means that their ceiling is higher. Everybody is going to have a certain ceiling as far as how good they can get, right? So just because you're better than everybody at a certain age doesn't mean that, by the time you're 35, you're going to be way better than everybody else. No, everybody's got a ceiling. And some people just hit their ceiling early. Like I think Cody Montgomery, I think he just hit his ceiling early, and that was as good as he was going to get. And he realized that, I'm not going to get much better than this. So why am I going to keep doing this? Maybe I want to do other things, spend time with my family, not beat my health up. Maybe he had to push his health a little bit to get to that point. But again, some people hit their ceiling very early. Some people hit their ceiling very late. Some people start later in life. It is going to be determined by, their health aspect and whatnot. And health is that's another thing to really talk about. I know Nick is very big on health now. So we will get certain inquiries. And I wanted to parlay into this question. So I specifically wanted to ask Nick this because Nick has gone from the bottom to the highest level of all of us here. So he has the experience. What do you tell a kid that says, I want to win the Olympia, but I want my health to be perfect? What do you say to that kid?
You'll be the first one to ever do it.
But how do you explain that to them?
So the way I do it, I'm not saying this is the only way or the right way either, but the way I tell them first is let's see if the risk is worth the reward. Let's give this 6 months to a year, even 2 years. Let's see how you progress. Let's see what because you don't know when someone's starting out, you guys know this, but people don't know. You don't know how it's going to look. Someone may have a really beautiful shape and structure and physique, and they start putting on muscle. You're like, it doesn't look good, right? Or there'll be holes in the physique where you're like, that's never going to be fixed. Your lats are way too high, or your arms suck, or you can't fix them. So that's always the first thing I tell people is don't make this commitment so early to yourself before you even tested the waters. Cause then all you're going to lead yourself is to letting yourself down. You're not going to get there. So I always tell people, leave it open. Let's see how you look after 1, 2, 3 years of real training, real dieting, real following a program. And then you can evaluate what it looks like.
But are you going to tell that kid from day one that there's no way you're getting to that level with perfect health?
Oh yeah, no, I'm telling them first. That's the first thing I tell them. I should have said that. Is to go from point A to point B. With bodybuilding, it's an aggressive push. There's no going slow with these things and feeling it out. From day one, you're training balls. I'm not even talking about just the drugs. I'm talking about the training intensity, the diet intensity, the food intensity, the rest intensity, the lifestyle intensity. It's overwhelming for 99% of people. Most people cannot do this intense program. I'm not talking about the drugs. I'm just talking about the program of being in the zone. Because you guys know, when you're meticulous about your training, your health, your recovery, your supplements, your gear, you make progress day after day, week. It's just happening. Shit works. When you fall off a little bit off the program, you go out one night, you don't get some sleep, you get stressed out, shit doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't happen as easily. So then you see, oh, wow, when I do that, that's what happens, but that's really hard to do all the fucking time. I don't know if I can do that. So you take the easy road, which is somewhere in the middle, and then you make progress so fucking slow that way. So I tell people you have to go 110% in, but you have to understand just because Joey did it with no health problems or I did with no health problems doesn't mean you're not going to have them earlier on or later on. There's no guarantee with it. You can blow your quad out and it's over. You can have kidney damage and failure in 6 months from drugs. You just do not know. And that's the really hard part with this. Cause you have to go all in on every aspect of it. Every variable has to be dialed in. And if you don't, you're never going to know if you're doing things the best you can. You don't know if you're going to be able to get there unless you're doing all the things the right way.
And there's always going to be a price to pay with that.
Yeah, always. And just from the training aspect, how intense it is. Thank God I walked away with nothing major. I had a little pec tear, some back injury, but my joints are fine. My shoulders are fine. My elbows are fine. I'm perfect, right? Thank God. Somehow I ended up being like that. But just the training aspect beats the shit out of your body. I mean, look what Kyle went through. I feel fucking terrible for you. Not to bring it up, but you didn't even hurt yourself bodybuilding. You're just getting so big and tight and muscular that normal things were fucking hard to do for you. You couldn't even normal things would snap your fucking body parts. So I don't think people understand that part of it alone. Like you're fragile when you're that big. Like you're very delicate.
I think a lot of this gets. There's a lot of misinformed people. It comes back to the fact that we have all this abundance of information out there, and I think people are always trying to look for the easy way out when obviously we know it works. Eat the fucking food, train hard. You have to take gear, blah blah blah. But now you have people come in and say, well, you don't have to train that hard. Don't have to train to failure. Only do 4 reps. Then you have people say, okay, well, you don't need to eat just chicken and rice. It doesn't matter. Have rotisserie chicken, eat your macros. And then people say, oh, well, these bodybuilders, they do that because they're just doing outdated science and they're dumb and we could do it this way. And then they're going to say, oh, we don't need to take 1-2 grams of gear. You only need 500 milligrams. And we're just going to do mass and a little bit of tests to have no estrogenic side effects. And nobody's getting better with any of these methods. And people just think they could do it in this smarter way and just avoid doing the shit that I think objectively sucks to do and nobody wants to do.
That's the
dishonesty drives me nuts. The dishonesty from especially from the pro level drives me nuts. Pretending that they don't go heavy on the gear and all the listen. Even being heavy sucks. I remember the first time I hit 265 specific. I text Nick and said, "How the hell are you 300 pounds and dealing with it?" And his answer was like, "You've got to hold it for a good period of time before your body adjusts." And then he was right. Like after I held 265 for 3, 4, 5 months, finally I could breathe and move again. But the first time I hit it, it sucked. Like, Nick, what did it feel like the first time you hit 300 pounds?
How about 360? That was really bad. No, so like, luckily, I mean, this is not lucky actually. This is terrible actually. Like I was really heavy, really young. So like I kind of grew with my body being that. Does that make sense? Like I was going through my 20s, like 280, 300. Like, you know what I'm saying? So like when I did Teen Nationals, already 205 on stage, you know what I'm saying? So like I was heavy. So I kind of acclimated to it really early. I didn't know any better, right? But now that I'm 230, 240 all the time, like I'm thinking about all those times I felt so shitty where I thought I felt good, but it was actually like horrible. Like, I mean, like horrible. I mean, my feet would swell up from like walking too much. They would hurt, not like edema swell, but like pain, like, cause you're so heavy walking around all the time. It was a lot of weight to carry around. That's probably like top 2 the worst things, like is the weight carrying around, finding clothes to fit, all that stupid shit,
Now, last thing I want to ask you guys is going back to what we were talking about with what pros are using, things of that nature. Obviously, I would assume people are using way more now than they were 20, 30 years ago. Yes. So with that taken into consideration, do you think that the increase in drugs has not in just open, because obviously open, these guys are fucking huge, but let's just take like classic compared to the 90s, which I don't know how much you were around then, how much you really know, but this closer sizes. Do you think that the increase in drugs has resulted in any better physiques? Because people always talk about how good the physiques were back then. And then I remember I had Justin Harris on, and he talked about when he was competing back in the day. He said they would just take whatever they could fucking find during prep. He said he just found mass, and like that's what I'm going to take. There was no meticulous, crazy cycle planned out, and they still came into shows, from what my understanding, looking pretty fucking crazy. So do you think this increase in rise in drugs has really resulted in anything beneficial?
I think always the top like 1% will always like do whatever it has to do. They have to do to get there, right? They're always gonna like the outliers that just work hard. They take all the drugs. They do everything perfect. I'd say the other 98% of people, they all, and I'm very confident saying this, they all think the drugs are going to do everything for them. So I don't think it results in better physiques. And I think we see burnout way quicker. We don't have guys having long careers, really, rarely anymore. You see guys that come into like open, especially, they're there for like a very quick second and then they're gone, right? They have like some health issue or an injury or they're burnt out. They can't do another show. Meanwhile, they did one show a year and they're like, it's like, how are you burnt out? Like, and that's all burnout because you're not healthy. That's not because of you eating properly and training and taking breaks and pacing yourself. That's because you've been literally like jamming the gas pedal down since you started and never ever took a deep breath and like was like, you know what? Let me come off a little bit and let's take a break and let's maybe not do a show this year. Let's do a couple shows this year and pace ourselves. And no one does that. So I think people think drugs are going to fix all their problems and then give them the results that they want. And it's the only way to do bodybuilding. Like they literally disassociate with how important the food is and the training is and the rest is. And everyone, in my opinion, at the top level, like I think Nick is the only one that's done a good job at this, is like scaling back once you have a good amount of tissue. Like you have a foundation. Like me and Nick talk all the time. He doesn't do as much volume or as frequent training as he used to do. He trains a couple times a week and he takes way more rest. And that's how you preserve your health. That's how you preserve your body and your joints, and without walking away from bodybuilding like dismantled, in a wheelchair. And not saying that because of Ronnie. I just mean most guys don't walk away from bodybuilding healthy. Like it's unfortunately a very rare thing. And at that level I'm talking about, most guys get sick, and it's not because they're eating too much food. It's not because they're training too hard. It's because the gears are given this false reality of like, I can keep going and I'm invincible and I can keep training harder. I can eat more. I can do this more. I can do doubles. I can do 3 days of cardio. 3 hours of cardio. Like there's no governor on anything they're doing. And that's the drug's fault, because you feel when you're on all that shit. I mean, you guys can all probably speak to that. I don't know if Seb can actually, but me and Kyle and Phil probably can. You don't feel pain. Like you're doing these massive workouts. You're getting these massive pumps. You wake up the next day, you feel fucking amazing. There's like no soreness.
Ignore it too. I think you ignore it a little bit.
And you ignore it because you want to get back in the gym and do it again because it feels so good. You get addicted to that feeling. And you're not noticing at the time any pushback or side effects. You're like, I can keep doing this. And then it all comes crashing down when you stop. I can speak for that fucking experience. And that's when you're like, your body catches up. It's all of a sudden like all this shit from behind you is like behind you. And all of a sudden just like it's a tidal wave. It just comes on top of you.
And it's crazy because we're talking about the PEDs right now. We're talking about the anabolic steroids right now. And I know I have friends that sell gear. I know sources. I have, whatever. And it's crazy, but people don't like what's really picked up is not the anabolic steroids. It's the fat burners. People they're what they're selling the most of is clenbuterol, T3, and then even if they don't carry DMP, everybody's asking for it.
They don't want to diet hard. Yeah.
They don't want to diet hard, but that's terrible for your heart. That's terrible for your cardiovascular system. People are consistently doing 100+ micrograms of T3 like candy.
Yeah. Yeah, and on top of like Adderalls and Vyvanse or like some stims and everything else, caffeine. Like even like people don't realize how fucking detrimental caffeine is to your adrenals and your fat burn. Like if you overdo it, and it's like that's just like one problem. And you add to all the other stuff that they're doing, and then like getting in shape takes work, right? Like you have to do cardio to get like inside out shred. Actually, Kyle, does Anton do cardio at his age?
Yeah, I had him do cardio.
So like, when I was younger and I started bodybuilding, John O'Regan would always preach to me like, you don't do cardio, burn all your muscle off, right? And that's like still like a thing today. I hear it all the time still, like, oh, you can't do cardio if you want to be a bodybuilder. I'm like, what the fuck you talking?
There's some people who don't need cardio depending.
Oh yeah.
On,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But absolutely. Nick, to bring something back up real quick, but the flip side is when you switched over to Factory, he threw 2 hours of cardio at you and you dropped like 30 pounds of mass before.
Then I went to the hospital after that show. Yeah, that was a fucking mess. Yeah, I went from no T3, no fat burners, no nothing to doing, and no cardio to doing 2 hours of cardio, like almost 200 micrograms of T3 and like 200 micrograms of clenbuterol. And I lost like 50 pounds in like 14 days or something crazy. And then I went to junior nationals. I was like a wet noodle. I was so skinny. And then after that show, I ballooned up to like 3 something. I went from 225 to like 3 something and was in the hospital for like 2 months after that. Because I got my fucking heart almost stopped because I ballooned so much weight up. But yeah, dangerous shit, like dangerous stuff.
I think the reality, the contemporary we live in, not just because I coach younger clients and I see what the up and coming generation brings. Everyone is just looking for the shortcut. What's the newest supplement? What's the newest fad and trend that's going to get me to the top as quick as possible? And it's not just in bodybuilding. It's literally in anything in life. How can I make the most money quicker? What do I need to do? How can I cheat my way to the top? And I get it. It's always been something. Now it's just more prevalent because you people are advertising it on their highlight reel of social media, and people want that quicker, right? You see a lot younger, more people now, I forgot the statistic, that are under 25 are much richer than they used to be. so they have access to certain things, etc. But bringing it back to bodybuilding, everyone is just always looking to take something. Not many people know how not to, even in their post cycle. Okay, well, can I use like you know how many people use Cialis now for the gym? Like what the fuck? And it's just like, oh, this is natural, this is cool. You're a fucking idiot. I think you're a drug addict. That's the problem. So I think people just have that false sense of reality. And then Sebastian, you had said something that was very true earlier. There's a lot of the internet has brought us. It's like the best and worst tool. You can literally learn anything on YouTube, teach yourself, educate yourself in a fantastic way. However, you can also go down those rabbit holes of being misled, perhaps by pure mal. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. People think they know what they're talking about, or hey, this worked for me, or my friend said this. But if you just from a bodybuilding standpoint, let's just say, okay, I want to eat like Sam, or I want to follow a clean diet. I want to train not to failure, I want to train to failure. All you need to really do as an individual, and anyone listening, if you just do one of those things and you say, okay, let me look from day 1 to day 180. I give myself 6 months. I'm not going to train to failure. Did you make improvements or did you not? You want to bang gear and take high amounts? Double, triple your dose of testosterone. Did you make progress or didn't you? And if you have to actually be honest with yourself, which most people just can't do, you'll know your answer. Like, hey, training to failure did help me. Oh, actually, training not to failure didn't help me. Right? You'll know your answers when you tripled your testosterone. Oh, I actually have fucking health problems now because I got lab work, or my acne's crazy. I didn't get any stronger. So you start to realize, and I think most pros or people that are experienced, I rarely find someone that tells me 10 years in, oh, I take more. Everyone is always says, some people might lie, but hey, I took more when I was younger. Because the reality is a lot of amateur level guys are taking more because they think that's the secret. And that's not to say pros don't take a lot to look a certain way. They look unhealthy. Okay. We know they're obviously doing something, but I think it's just, there's levels to it. As you get to 250, to maintain being 250 is fucking drugs. You need drugs more than just protein and food, right? So be 150 on stage, like if a new kid that comes to me wants to compete and you're 150 pounds, you don't need all the drugs, bro. You need muscle and you need time to accrue the tissue. That's just the purest answer I can give someone, you know?
The biggest issue is they take your like when someone clipped like my cycle I did for whatever thing, right? And they think that's your dose, you know, for 10 years straight. And it's like, that was one show, one cycle that I did this. It's not because I didn't do that whole cycle for 15 years straight. Like I'd be dead at that point. So like things are titrated up and down. And like like when I got older, maybe some things were higher that were lower when I was younger, or some things were lower when I was, you know what I'm saying? I respond differently to different things. And like quality, again, like quality of things I was using was varying all the time. So like maybe this one worked better, it didn't work better, I needed less. So like it wasn't like you set your dose, you just do that for 5 years, 3 years straight. Like no, like that's crazy.
Do you think, I don't know if you ever honestly thought about it, as best as you became at whatever age that was, whatever show that was, do you think you would have looked that way without taking the drugs that you took? Or do you think you would have needed more time?
You mean for that specific show, that cycle, or you mean like up to that point?
Well, up to that point, the best you've been, the most muscle you had, the strongest you were, maybe.
I would say like my and this doesn't matter, it's irrelevant to the conversation, but like I would say like my 2012 USA show, the year I did USA's the first time, that I took second, I lost to like Stephen Frazier. I was training on point, like I was pushing myself. I didn't party, I didn't do anything off my rocker. Drugs were like moderate, you know what I'm saying? Like nothing crazy, like for me at least, it was nothing crazy. My look was unbelievable that year, you know, when I took second. I just had a good look to my physique. And yeah, I think the combination of doing everything the right way for me that year led me to that point. Because then when I did turn pro, I wasn't serious. I was partying already. I was going out. I was doing way more drugs and not looking the same. So that's only like 2 years apart, you know, because the year in between, I was prepping for nationals and I did a bad tricep injection and I had to pull out of nationals like 5 days before because my arm was like fucking like a leg pretty much. that year I looked really good too. And then after that, I just kind of was like, I hate this whole thing, and I didn't have much time to prep for USA's the following year. I ended up winning, but I wasn't serious at all that year prepping. Like Phil can tell you, I was at literally like Atlantic City the week before USA's, like high on ecstasy and drinking alcohol, like literally the week before I turned pro.
I remember somebody texting me that you were, what was it? You were at Paris or something 4 weeks out, and I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah. And like 1 a.m. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
So but my look for me, like bodybuilding, I didn't like the way I looked when I turned pro. I looked way better 2 years before that, So I think, but up to that point, to answer your question,
yeah,
I think I definitely could have done way less for drug wise, and my training up to that point was really good to 2012, and then I started to like slowly not be as intense,
Do you think, from an anabolic standpoint, you're saying, hey, I could have did less? Now, I don't know. I don't think you touched on earlier what your doses were for growth hormone, right? There's some popularity in recent podcasts I see now of people taking 18 IUs of Steroid a day to see what it does and stuff like that. I don't know your experience, or, we touched on some other bodybuilders earlier that you might have not been friends with. Is that at certain dosages the answer to the growth, and you can keep anabolics lower, or maybe that's not the case from your experience?
So I think growth hormone's an interesting conversation. There's so many people that like dismiss it as not being important. I think that's complete bullshit. I think it's very important. For my personal experience, it was very important.
Yeah.
As far as the doses go, like obviously the milligram and the type of growth plays a big role in that. Like when people tell me they're taking in the teens of IUs, I'm always like, well, what's the milligram of the kit? Oh, it's generic. And I'm like, oh, well, it's like probably 1 milligram. Like who knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
But if someone tells me they're taking like a nortotropin or amitrope or humatrope or serostem, and it's like 6 milligram plus, and they're taking like 10 IUs of it or 15 IUs of it, I'm like, how? Like carpal tunnel, like you're just shooting out of the gate. Like how are you not in pain? Like your joints and everything, right? Like it took me forever to get to 10 IUs. Like it took years to do that. And I was using mostly serostem when I was younger. It's all I could get, right? So it was a 6 milligram kit. So my sweet spot for years was like 4 to 6 IUs. And like that's all I could really handle, to be honest. Like the carpal tunnel would get so bad, like you couldn't even like hold a toothbrush, right? Like it was so painful for me, right? And like some guys I hear take it and they're like, okay. But I think being on growth hormone for all those years, like from when I was like a young, like 18, 19, all the way through like my 20s, I think that's why I built so much muscle tissue. But also I didn't look like Anton at 19, like the separation and the thinness of the skin. And I think that plays a big role in putting on so much tissue so quick. You don't get that look to the muscle either, the muscle maturity. Like Dallas, like he blew up, but he had zero separation when he dieted, like zero. Like his quads were a little separated, but he was just a big ball of fucking muscle. Like, and we see that all the time. The guys that hammer too much growth hormone, they put on tons of tissue, but the detail's gone, right? Like the silhouette is amazing, but there's just no detail inside that physique at all. And I had the same problem. I wasn't very detailed at all until I did my first pro show. I was almost 30 at that point, 29, 28. And I had good separation then. But when I was in my younger 20s, like I was just a big ball of round muscle, and I think it's good and bad. If you push too much of it, I think there's definitely like.
Well, you actually didn't even run a high dose of GH for that AC Pro show either.
No, not at all. Like 4 to 6 was always like like a 6 milligram kit was always like great for me, Plus I got so tired on it. I don't know if you guys like my motivation to do anything is zero. Like I don't even use growth hormone now because I know how tired I get on it. Like I want to use it for like, anti-aging. But like I literally tried it so many times since I've come off it, like when I was like 30, 31. And I literally get so unmotivated, so tired. I can sleep forever. I'm like, how did I ever fucking do this? Like, it was horrible. So I don't even use it anymore. But back then, I remember being tired all the time, but I didn't give a fuck, obviously. I had nothing to do, But I definitely think there's a line with growth hormone that you have to, like, teeter slow, like definitely, like, very careful with it with putting on too much tissue. Like, if you have that genetic response, at least, right? But I think anabolics play a bigger role in, like, your strength and your endurance and your ability to build muscle quicker for sure. The return on your investments immediately with steroids, right? Growth hormone, you got to use it for a while.
Well, growth hormone is going to give you more actual muscle cells, but the steroids are what's going to grow those cells, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, you get it slow over a period of time, and that's what really helped you accrue those cells, whereas some people will blast it and, they'll get a lot all at once, but they're also thickening their skin because of the collagen upregulation.
Yeah.
So like you said, they're completely losing their detail. And then when you drop your dose back and got a little older and your skin thinned out, well, that detail came back.
My skin now is like saran wrap thin. Like I don't even I've never been this vascular. And like, listen, I eat really good now. I don't eat like shit ever, but I wish I had the thinness of my skin now. Like I'd be fucking razor sharp on stage. Like I didn't have that when I was younger. I had very thick fucking skin, and that was always an issue, right? It wasn't to the point where it was like ruining my look or anything, but I just wish I had that when I competed then,
I agree with you. Like right now, like I haven't trained legs in 2.5 years. My quads are strided. My quads really weren't strided when I competed, but it's because I needed a big dose of GH to be able to compete with everybody because my genetics were terrible as far as being big and growing and round and everything. Yeah. So GH really was my solution to be able to step up with all those guys, but it cost me detail. My skin was a little thicker. I was holding more water. I didn't have that thin skin and that detail. Like I'm telling you, my legs are more strided right now. I haven't trained them in 2.5 years than they were on stage when I was at my best.
Yeah. I think if like a younger guy is going to commit to it, I think it's worth it as long as you're like pacing yourself with it. But I think the only reason why I got that big though, like when I was in my early 20s, like that freaky big was because of growth hormone. It wasn't just because of steroids though. I'm not going to sit there and say like Deca and my Anadrol and my testosterone made me look that big. Like, cause I was like freaky big at 6 foot. Like it was a lot, not like saying that in a bragging way, but I just don't think, I didn't know that many people that age that had that much muscle besides Dallas. Like that was like the only person during that time. And Dallas was like blowing past me because he was like using even more than I was, but I definitely contributed to the growth hormone then for sure. Right. But luckily it didn't like destroy my body,
You also used insulin at the time though?
Yeah. I mean, listen, there was years where I was very aggressive with it. Like, and there was years where I just hated it because, as Phil knows, my blood sugar was a fucking disaster. Like it was all over the place. And I'm sure I was very insulin resistant from all the growth hormone and everything else and the diet, obviously. But like I was playing like Russian roulette using insulin. Like the way
crashed without insulin.
Yeah, I was crashing without insulin. So like when I threw insulin in, I had to be like fucking dialed. Like everything had to be like perfect. Like, and if I exerted too much energy that day, blood sugar would just fucking plummet all fucking day. I'm sitting there smashing Snicker bars like after Snicker bar to keep myself.
I remember the year that we did that he did his pro debut, that he did Atlantic City. Like we joked about it earlier, but because he couldn't eat the food volume, I literally stuffed his pantry with Pop-Tarts because I couldn't feed him enough for him to stop going flat and dropping weight because his blood sugar would drop like all day. So I'm like literally shoving Pop-Tarts in his mouth because he can't. How much rice can you possibly eat? Yeah. The volume. So like he's like sick of fucking Pop-Tarts at some point.
Yeah, I hated them. Yeah, I literally hated them.
Should have used the chocolate milk and cereal.
That was fuck.
No, but that was a unique situation where like you couldn't give him enough rice to keep him from going hypo. It just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
We needed a denser source, smaller, that could get those carbs in. And that was all we could really think of that he could stomach.
When I was younger, though, like when the insulin days, Lantis was like my best friend.
Lantis.
Sure. Yeah, I loved Lantis. Yeah.
So the reason I asked those questions in that strategic order, ultimately what I was getting at, as I anticipated most of your answers, was I think anyone that is trying to start bodybuilding and they're like, hey, I want to be the best I can possibly be. I think the best thing they can do, really commit to training, right? So hit us up for coaching. But jokes aside, follow a training regimen the best you can. It doesn't mean you have to train.
Training has to be on point.
Training has to be something consistent, right? Consistent. Diet, be pretty fucking good with it. Have something strategically that you follow. And then the gear, if you start out the gate really hard, there's only there's a ceiling eventually. You might hit, I don't know what your ceiling could be. Maybe it's 1,000 mgs a test, 1,500, 2,000. But if you need all of that just to get from 180 to 200, where the fuck you going to go, right? So I think that's the main thing is there's levels to it. Don't come out the gate 4 grams of gear, GH, insulin, whatever fucking new SARM is out. That's not going to set you up for success. I think all it does is start to makes your body peak very early, prematurely, before you even have the tissue.
Kyle, expand on that because hold on, Phil.
Go ahead.
I lost my train of thought. You said 4 grams a year, right? So you're giving an extreme example, but now we also have kids that on the opposite end of the spectrum, they think that if I'm going to start gear, I'm going to start at 250 test.
Yeah, that's your TRT.
But where do you start at? What's actually reasonable to start at?
I think if you're going to I look at TRT, if I'm bringing someone down to go to a post cycle or potentially to go to a true TRT, to me is between 100 and 150 milligrams max per week. An athlete TRT is about 200 milligrams. That's realistic to where even when they get lab work, still going to be very high upper echelon of the scale. If someone comes to me, hey, I want to take testosterone, I want to take 150 a week. Don't waste your fucking time. Like, what are you doing? Unless your testosterone is literally 100 for whatever reason on your lab work. Okay, you're 22 years old, you're 100 somehow. What the hell are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't think there's a certain number, but
people think a gram is a lot.
Yes, but when you start to add, let's just say you add 2 compounds in an oral, which is like super popular. People don't just start with test anymore for whatever reason. They do test fucking D-ball, an MPP or something like that. Now, real quick, you're at 1,000 milligrams. If you do the math, you take 50 D-ball a day, that's 350 a week. 400 tests, that's 750, and then a little deca. Like that's 1,000 right there off the rip. So I guess to kind of answer your question, I wouldn't have somebody start at 200 tests if they never took anything. I think 350 should generate some potential growth. Maybe titrate that cycle up over 12 to 14 weeks of 350 to 400. And if they're making progress, cool. I start to take notes. I'm like, all right, this makes sense. Next time, maybe we'll start at 400, go up to 500, or maybe 600. But eventually, if you do every cycle like that, and hey, you gained a good 8-10 pounds, awesome. You gained a good 6-7 pounds. It's going to start going down because the bigger you get, the harder it is to put on tissue. But if you come out the gate, that initial 10 pounds you put on that you had to use 1,000 milligrams of stuff for, versus you could have did the same thing with 300 milligrams. I think the option is take the lesser amount. A little goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people think that there's a certain rate of growth that they want to have or that they see other people have, and they think more is better. So if I have somebody who's growing at a rate of, listen, you're always going to have that initial spike, that initial 5, 10, 8, 10, whatever jump. But that if you're putting on weight, maybe a couple pounds every week, something like that, if you're moving at a good pace, and they're like, oh, well, I really want to step it up. This is as fast as you grow. Muscle grows like watching grass grow, So like you're not gonna grow faster because you're gonna bang your doses up more. You're growing at a good pace. Keep doing that. And then when that stops, then we can think about adjusting the diet, adjusting the training, adjusting your rest. Then we can think about the drugs last.
Yeah, I don't think the drugs speed anything up, do you?
No, I don't. I think that you're not gonna max everything out, and then you can start thinking about that.
Yeah. Whoa! What do you mean by that? That's the drugs don't speed anything up.
You want to talk, Phil? You want me to go?
Meaning if you're growing at a certain rate, our bodies can only grow so fast. If you're putting on 5 pounds a week, guess what? That's not muscle. You're putting on fucking water and fat too.
Right.
You're not jumping up 5 pounds a week. That is not happening. You can only grow at a certain rate. So banging the doses harder and harder and harder are not going to guarantee you grow. They're going to guarantee you put on more water weight. There's more inflammation, probably going to upset your gut. Your gut's going to inflame. You're going to hold more water there. You think you're getting big, but you gained a whole bunch of junk weight. And then when your cycle's over, you drop 20 pounds right away. And what the hell happened? I thought I was huge. You were never huge. There was a bunch of other garbage weight that you had accrued. So if you're growing at a good rate, keep growing at that rate. And then you like you guys were saying before, you don't just jump from 1 gram to 4, right? You end up at 4 because every time you stall, then you increase it a little bit. You stall, you increase it a little bit. But that's only if training and nutrition and recovery is also already perfect. And then eventually you end up at those doses if that's how high you needed to go to get to the size you wanted to be. Maybe you reach your biggest size at 3 grams. We don't know.
Yeah. No, I thought he was saying that the drugs just don't speed up growth in general. Like,
like I just
being
mean
off compared to being on. But no,
No, I mean, like if you give everyone 6 months, their threshold is only so much they can put on so much in that window of time, and like you already know, like the rate at which you're recovering with the drugs doesn't increase because your dose is increasing. Like you're not going to multiply it by 10 because you're taking 10 times the dose,
Well, everything that we take just makes our machinery work in a certain way. We still have the same machinery. It's still the same factory. You're not getting the machines in there. You can only grow at a certain rate. No matter how much you do, no matter how much you eat, no matter how much you take, your body can still, your unique body can only build muscle at a certain rate. And people get very impatient and they see this other guy put on 20 pounds of muscle last cycle. Well, guess what? You're not him. You're going to grow at your rate. And as long as your rate is moving, as long as your performance is continually improving, as long as your composition is getting better, you're looking better, you're growing, the scale is moving, or you're just visually improving, recompositioning, then you're moving at a good rate. Don't get greedy, because I've seen too many times, and coaches do this all the time. A client will be growing, so then the coach increases the calories. Why the hell did you just increase the calories when they're growing? And then they do it again, and then they do it again. Eventually, the client's sensitivity is shot in their fat. Yeah. Now you got to reverse diet, mini diet them, right? And try to reset everything you screwed up because you kept adding food when you didn't have to keep adding food. They were growing.
The general consensus is that you have to eat like 5,000 calories a day. And like, people don't realize how far like 2,500 calories, and I'm just talking very general, like not talking about macros, but like 2,000, 2,500 calories is a lot for most people. Like most people are fine on that, right? Like an average person, right? And like everyone's like, you're not feeding me enough. I'm not going to grow. I'm on this deficit diet. I'm like, you even know what your BMR is or anything? Like you're like literally like you're in a surplus now at 500 calories. Like you're not metabolically burning that much food. Like chill the fuck out, dude. Like
you're carrying 100,000 calories of body fat. You're not in a deficit.
You have plenty of body fat on you. You're good. You got plenty of energy stored for yourself. So
you're not in a deficit until your body fat is gone.
Yeah.
Now you might be in a deficit as far as what you burn on a daily basis versus whatnot, but we always have that calorie medium. We're carrying 100,000 calories in fat or something like that, depending on who you are.
But people see numbers online like, Joe fucking bulked on 6,500. I'm like, that guy didn't eat fucking anywhere near 6,500 fucking calories.
Exactly. They definitely did not.
Bullshit. Like I remember like my peak off season when I did calculate it back then, which no one calculated shit back then, to be honest with you. We were just like 6 ounces. Like everything was just ounces. Like no one ever calculated anything what they were doing. Like I remember being like 3,500, 4,000 calories, like total. Like that was like a lot of food, maybe like 5,000 when I use like insulin or something. But like that's every day, like it's not one day.
Once somebody who's 300 pounds with abs.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I was maintaining a crazy body weight and muscle mass on that. And like, I hear guys that are like 180 eating like 4. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like you're gonna be fat as fuck. And no, my metabolism's so fast. I'm like, okay. Right. Yeah.
They just don't know how to eat. I mean, the majority of my clients are all younger guys, I'm sure, cause like a similar audience. And but I have very few guys that even need to push past 4,000 calories. And those are like the genetic anomalies that just do have fucking crazy metabolisms. Other than that, most people are like between the high 2s and like mid 3s and they're growing fine.
That's so important to hear though. Cause like so many guys think they have to eat so much, like so much.
How many times guys, do you get a client and they're eating X amount of calories and this diet is just structured like shit, and you actually reduce their calories but make the diet more efficient, and now they're growing?
Oh yeah. 100%.
It wasn't a you have to eat more situation. It was a your diet is structured like shit situation.
Or they get mad when you send them a diet over for the first time. They're like, I was eating 1,000 calories more. I'm gonna shrivel up. And then they come back to me like a week later, I'm so full. I'm like, what happened, bro? What happened?
I wanted to ask you, Nick, I had one more question for you. During your, I don't know, years of growth, not growth hormone, but literally growth, maybe 18 to 22, 18 to 23.
Yeah.
How focused on the scale were you?
That's a good question. I'm going to lie and sit there and say that I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking at it.
Right. I think,
but I didn't let it mentally stall out anything I did. I was really good about it. I'm not going to lie. I don't know why, but for some reason I didn't give a fuck that much. Maybe, and this is I'm being a little biased here. Like maybe because I was so heavy already, it didn't fuck with my head, and everyone's inflating my head like, you're so big, you're so big. Like I heard it all the time. I'm not saying that like an ego way. So it didn't bother me if I weighed 250 and 248 and like, it didn't even cross my mind that I was small ever. Like I knew I was big.
What did you focus the most on then? Was it more like, hey, I'm getting stronger, or I look in the mirror? Like, I don't know. Did you take check-ins? Like, did you weigh yourself every day? Like,
No, I was really good about like not doing check-ins, but I was very meticulous about like taking photos and videos. Even back then I was.
Okay.
And my thing was visual. Like I literally would just go off visuals, and this sounds like stupid, but I would take photos and print them out, and I put them on my fridge, and I would like draw circles on shit that I wanted to like improve, like my sweeps or my shoulders, right? And I would just literally do the poses in the photos, and I'd be like, okay, I need a little more shoulder caps, I need a little more here. And that's how I literally focused on building my physique. I didn't care what the weight, I didn't care what like Joe told me I need to work on. I didn't get distracted by any of that stuff. And
let's clarify something here just real quick about, because we keep referring to Nick about being 300 pounds. Nick wasn't like today's guy's 300 pounds. Nick was 300 with like a 30-inch waist.
yeah, I was.
You know, he wasn't holding 40 of that in the waistline like a lot of guys.
My waist is still small.
Everybody's 300 pounds, but they have a 40-inch waist.
Yeah, my waist is still small. Like I literally just went to the clothing guy I go to, and he measured it, and it was literally 33, like literally with a real professional tape measure. Like it's still small. So I never blew my waist out, which was, I don't know how, because I was eating like a lot of food at some points, right? Like when I was using all the other shit, and everyone talks about all this growth hormone, all the visceral fat you build and all this shit. My waist never grew for some reason, right? And I didn't do anything in particular to keep it small. I trained my abs always. I always trained my abs, right? I made Phil do abs. He never did abs. I would make him do them. He was like, I fucking hate abs. He's like, I have them anyway. And I'd be like, no, we're doing fucking abs. And that's one thing I definitely always did, was always train my abs. And like I said, there was no secret to that. But as far as like the weight goes, I didn't obsess over it. Like I used it as a scale of like, hey, I'm gaining weight too quick, or I'm dropping too much. But I was really good about it. And like I said, I don't have an answer to why I was so good about it, but that's definitely the biggest hurdle for people today is looking at that scale. Like it drives people nuts, right? And especially when I prepped, my weight would get really low sometimes in prep. Like I would drop a lot of weight and then it would fill back out. And I realized, like, you know what? Like it is what it is. Like I'm going to end up being in shape, and that's all I really cared about, you know? But the scale is a hard thing to overcome. I get why people care about it. We also got to think about, like, you're stepping on a scale. And I always tell people, like, imagine you're stepping on a scale and that scale has no idea what's standing on it. Just registering your bones, your muscle, whatever you're wearing. Like, it doesn't equal anything. It's just a number. And like, yeah, that number could mean something if you start digging deeper, but visually it's just a fucking number. And like, when you go on stage, no one's measuring your fucking weight. No one's measuring your arms. No one's measuring your legs. They're just looking at your physique compared to others. That's all they're doing, you know? And that's why I just started doing the circle thing. I was like, let me compare my physique to myself. Yeah. And okay, my front double looks like shit. What's wrong with it? My arms aren't peaking well. My lats aren't flaring out. My waist, my thighs, whatever. And I started building workouts like around those things. That's what I got to. But I stayed away from the scale. Like I wasn't measuring my weight all the time. You know, I had an idea what I weighed, but I wasn't like the guy that was like, oh, I lost 3 pounds because I worked an expo. I'm fucking skinny now. Like, no, I didn't think like that at all.
I think that's where people get hung up. They think like the epic bulk is how much quality. They don't think it's not quality to them. It's just like the quantity. Oh, I gained 40 pounds.
Yep.
Yeah, but fucking 30 pounds is fat. And now when you go down, you're the same. Right. So
yeah, I
think it's just hard for people to overcome. And I was just curious if it never bothered you. Or if you had an epiphany where, hey, I don't give a fuck. But obviously, in your case, you were a little heavier, so maybe it didn't matter. But
it's so overplayed today.
To get there,
it's so overplayed today that people will lie about their weight. Now, I'm gonna really piss somebody off with this, but yeah, I just have to be honest, like, because one of my apprentices, Dylan Blum, prepped Tonio when he won the New York Pro. And I was privy to the entire peak. I saw everything. You know what he weighed on stage? Take a guess.
What show?
When he won the New York Pro. He won the New York Pro was 2 years ago?
Oh, yeah, New York Pro. What? I don't know how even tall he is. Was he 5'7", 5'8", or something?
He's about 5'8".
What, 220, 225?
He was about, I think he was about 210. He was under 212.
Yeah. He's got a hollow bone.
But everybody lies because they think that if they're perceived as small, then the judges are going to judge them like they're small. Yeah. But he has such phenomenal shape. Wild. He looks just as big as the guys who's 240, 250, you know? But, you know, everybody feels like they have to lie about it because everybody else is inflating their numbers. You know, bring a scale to the Arnold and ask people to step on it. They're not going to.
Yeah, they'll freak out. Yeah. Yeah. I think it plays a role as a coach, right? Or someone that's mentor, like whatever, right? Because obviously, you know, those numbers mean something to us, but for the athlete, they should just put a piece of duct tape over it. Like, don't even fucking look at it, you know? If it fucks with your head, don't do it. Don't have a scale, period. You know?
I mean, you get clients all the time that always ask about it. My weight hasn't gone up. You know, this happened. That they're always just hyper fixated on a number. I haven't lost weight this week. Should we drop the food?
It's the most annoying, regurgitating, not annoying, but like just repetitive question I get everyone, even regular people, like they're obsessed with the scale. Like regular people are obsessed with it. So, and I get it. Like some people fantasize about when they were in high school. You get like the older guy that's like, I want to look like I was in high school at 190 and and I'm like, bro, that's long gone. Like you're fucking 50 now. Like you're not gonna be 190 again. So I think they fantasize about the way they looked at a weight and they just like imagine getting back to that, and that's the way they're gonna look. But as you guys know, like your body changes so much as you get older, and the weight's not the same. You know, the 240 I carry now was nothing like a 240 when I carried when I was younger. It's totally fucking different, you know?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So,
all right, man. Well, we're going on 2.5 hours now, so let's
it's been a great time.
Let's wrap this up. I appreciate you coming on.
I think there's a lot of good information in here that nobody has ever talked about.
Well, I hope it does well for you guys.
Well, anything you got going on, Nick? Anything you want to plug? How can people find you?
Yeah, don't hire anyone here except me. And whatever their rates are, I'll beat it by a lot. I'm just kidding. No, I'm good, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's good to talk to you guys. And obviously,
no, this is a good time. We have to do this again.
Yeah, I'd love to do it again whenever you guys want.
Phil, Kyle, anything you got before we head out?
No, just don't hire Nick.
All right.
Everybody knows where to find me, so.
Well, there you guys have it.
I think, Nick, what is your channel now? Aren't you like starting something?
I just have my podcast on Patreon. Same thing. Yeah, that's where I'll be posting a lot of the videos and stuff on there now since YouTube loves me so much.
Right.
All right, well, this will be on YouTube, so
no, you're
over to Patreon. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thank you guys for coming on, and we'll see you on the next episode of Brass Tack Bodybuilding. Peace out.